Imagine being abandoned at the altar, with 300 guests watching, and a letter in your groom's handwriting revealing he ran away with your own cousin. This is the scandal that destroys Lady Penelope Harrington's life and sparks the most unexpected, forbidden, deliciously reckless partnership of her life. Chapter 1. The bride left at the altar. The flowers were perfect. Penelope Harrington noticed this with the strange, detached clarity of someone observing their own life from a great distance. White roses and lilies adorned every pew of St. Michael's Church in Mayfair, their scent thick and cloying in the warm June air. Silk ribbons in cream and gold cascaded from the ends of each row. 300 guests filled the church to capacity, their whispers creating a low hum that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Everything was perfect, except for one rather critical detail. The groom had not arrived. "He'll be here any moment, dearest," her mother whispered from behind the heavy oak door of the vestibule, though her voice carried a tremor that belied her words. Lady Harrington's hands fluttered nervously at Penelope's veil, adjusting what needed no adjustment. "The traffic from his lodgings can be dreadful this time of day. You know how London is." Penelope said nothing. She stood perfectly still in her wedding gown, an elaborate confection of ivory silk and Belgian lace that had cost her father a small fortune, and watched the clock on the wall. 2:30. The ceremony had been scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock precisely. Edmund was never late. He prided himself on punctuality. It was one of the many proper, respectable qualities that had made him such a suitable match. "Perhaps we should wait just a few minutes more," her father said, though he would not meet her eyes. Sir Thomas Harrington stood near the door, his face growing redder with each passing moment. Whether from embarrassment or anger, Penelope could not tell. Likely both. Through the crack in the door, she could see the assembled guests beginning to shift restlessly. Fans snapped open, heads turned. The whispers grew louder. Another 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Penelope's hands, hidden within the folds of her gown, began to shake. She curled them into fists, nails biting into her palms. "He will come," she told herself fiercely. Edmund would never. He wouldn't. The side door of the church opened with a sharp crack that silenced every whisper. A young man in livery stumbled through, looking harried and distinctly uncomfortable. He clutched a sealed letter in one hand and appeared to be searching desperately for someone in authority. Sir Thomas strode forward before the messenger could take 3 steps. "What is the meaning of this? Where is Mr. Cartwright?" The messenger's face went pale. I was instructed to deliver this, sir, to Miss Harrington, directly." The vestibule seemed to shrink. Penelope felt her mother's hand clutch at her arm, but the touch felt distant, as though it belonged to someone else's body entirely. "Give it here," her father demanded, reaching for the letter. "No." Penelope's voice surprised her, steady, calm, utterly unlike the chaos beginning to unfurl in her chest. "He said it was for me." She crossed the small space and took the letter from the messenger's trembling hand. The paper was cheap, hastily folded. Her name was scrawled across the front in Edmund's familiar hand, though the letters looked rushed, almost careless. Behind her, her mother made a small, choked sound. "Penelope, darling, perhaps your father should—" But Penelope had already broken the seal. The letter was brief, brutally so. "My dear Penelope, I fear I must beg your forgiveness for the unfortunate timing of this correspondence. By the time you read this, Charlotte and I will be well on our way to Gretna Green, where we intend to be married with all possible haste. I know this must come as a shock, but I hope you will understand that the heart wants what it wants. Charlotte and I have discovered a passion between us that simply cannot be denied. We have tried, truly, we have, but it has become clear that our love is of a nature that will not be suppressed. I apologize for any embarrassment this may cause you. I had hoped to inform you privately, but circumstances necessitated our immediate departure. I trust that in time you will come to see that this is for the best. You deserve a husband who can love you with his whole heart, and I fear I am no longer that man. Please accept my sincere wishes for your future happiness. Your servant." The letter slipped from Penelope's fingers and fluttered to the floor. Charlotte, her cousin Charlotte, the same Charlotte who had helped lace her into this wedding gown 2 hours ago. The same Charlotte who had smiled at her in the looking glass and said, "You'll be so happy, Pen." Edmund is exactly the sort of husband every girl dreams of. Penelope? Her mother's voice seemed to come from very far away. Darling, what does it say? She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the letter lying at her feet like a serpent coiled on marble. Her father snatched it up. His face, already red, turned nearly purple as he read. When he finished, he looked at Penelope with something that might have been pity if it weren't so heavily laced with fury. That blackguard, he hissed. That absolute. He caught himself, seemed to remember they were standing in a church vestibule, and lowered his voice to a savage whisper. With Charlotte! Charlotte! What are we going to do? Lady Harrington clutched her husband's sleeve, her carefully arranged curls beginning to slip from their pins. Thomas, there are 300 people out there. 300! The Dowager Countess of Pemberton is in the third pew. Lord and Lady Ashford came all the way from Kent. The bishop himself agreed to. I am aware of who is present, madam, Sir Thomas snapped. They were talking about her as though she weren't there, as though she were a piece of furniture that had been damaged in transit and needed to be dealt with before the guests noticed. Penelope found her voice. It came out flat, empty. I have to tell them. Her parents turned to stare at her. Tell them what precisely? Her father asked. That there will be no wedding. She smoothed down the front of her gown with hands that had stopped shaking and gone cold instead. They're waiting. I have to tell them. Absolutely not, Sir Thomas said at once. I will make the announcement. You will remain here until no. The word hung in the air between them. Penelope had never contradicted her father in her life. She had been the perfect daughter, obedient, accomplished, demure, everything a baronet's daughter should be. And where had it gotten her? I will do it, she said again, more firmly this time. This is my wedding, or rather, it was supposed to be, I will tell them. Before either of her parents could protest further, she pushed open the door and stepped into the church. The effect was instantaneous. Every head turned toward her. The whispers died away into perfect, breathless silence. Penelope walked down the aisle alone. Her veil trailed behind her like a ghost. Her silk slippers whispered against the stone floor. 300 pairs of eyes watched her every step. Some curious, some pitying, some already gleaming with the malicious delight of those who live for scandal. She reached the altar where Reverend Phillips stood looking deeply uncomfortable. The elderly clergyman opened his mouth as if to speak, but Penelope turned to face the congregation before he could find words. She had prepared no speech, had no idea what she was going to say until the words left her mouth. There will be no wedding today. Her voice carried clearly through the silent church. Mr. Cartwright has chosen to marry my cousin, Miss Charlotte Harrington, instead. They eloped to Gretna Green last night. I have only just been informed. For one heartbeat, two, the silence held. Then it shattered. The whispers erupted like a wave breaking against rocks. Shocked gasps, scandalized exclamations. The rustling of 300 people all trying to process the same delicious piece of gossip simultaneously. Good heavens! With her own cousin? The poor dear. How absolutely dreadful. Well, I always thought there was something not quite right about that Cartwright fellow. Penelope stood perfectly still and let the talk wash over her. She would not cry, would not run, would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she curtsied, a perfect, practiced curtsy, exactly as her governess had taught her, and said, I apologise for the inconvenience. Good afternoon. Then she turned and walked back down the aisle with her head held high. The hours that followed blurred together into a nightmare of humiliation. Her mother had hysterics and had to be given laudanum by the family physician. Her father locked himself in his study with a bottle of brandy and refused to see anyone. The servants moved through the house like ghosts, avoiding eye contact, speaking in hushed whispers. Penelope sat in her room, still wearing her wedding gown because no one had come to help her out of it and she couldn't reach the fastenings herself. The invitations began to arrive almost immediately, or rather, the cancellations of invitations. Lady Pemberton's card party next week. So, sorry, but perhaps it would be best if Penelope stayed home this time and given the circumstances. The Ashfords' garden party, they did hope she would understand, but it might be uncomfortable for everyone involved. Mrs. Whitmore's music hall, Well, with Charlotte being family, it would be rather awkward, wouldn't it? By evening, the stack of cancellations on the hall table had grown to a small mountain. Penelope sat by her window and watched the sun set over London. She had not cried, had not screamed, had not done any of the things she desperately wanted to do. Instead, she felt nothing, just a vast, echoing emptiness where her future used to be. A knock sounded at the door. "Go away," she called without turning. "Miss Penelope?" It was Davies, their butler. His voice carried an odd note, almost apologetic. "There is a gentleman here to see you. I am not receiving visitors. He was quite insistent, Miss. Lord Ashcroft, he said—" Penelope was on her feet before Davies finished speaking. "Adrian is here?" "Yes, miss. In the drawing room. Your father has not yet been informed." But Penelope was already moving, sweeping past the butler and down the stairs with her ruined wedding dress trailing behind her like the train of a queen. She found him standing by the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the dying light. Adrian Blackwood, Viscount Ashcroft, looked exactly as he always did. Elegant in a way that suggested he didn't give a damn about elegance, his dark hair slightly too long to be fashionable, his cravat tied with deliberate carelessness that probably took his vow to achieve. He turned when she entered, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Anger, she thought, but not at her. "I heard," he said without preamble. "The whole city's heard by now." Penelope closed the drawing-room door behind her. Propriety demanded she leave it open, but propriety could go to hell. She had been ruined today. A closed door hardly mattered now. "Then you know what a fool I've been," she said, her voice brittle. "No." Adrian crossed the room in 3 long strides. "I know what a fool he was. Cartwright, I mean. And your cousin." His jaw tightened. "I always thought Edmund was a pompous ass, but I never took him for a complete coward. He left me standing at the altar, Adrian, in front of 300 people, with—" Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. "With a note. A bloody note." "I know," his voice gentled. "Pen, don't." She held up a hand, trying desperately to hold herself together. "Don't be kind to me. Not right now. If you're kind, I'll—" She couldn't finish. Her throat had closed up, and the tears she'd been holding back all day suddenly threatened to spill over. Adrian did the kindest, most terrible thing he could have done. He pulled her into his arms and held her, while she finally broke. She sobbed into his coat, great, gasping, ugly sobs that shook her entire body. He said nothing, just held her and let her fall apart, one hand moving in slow circles on her back, the other cradling her head against his shoulder. When the storm finally passed, Penelope pulled back, mortified. "I've ruined your coat." "It's seen worse." Adrian produced a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her. "Much worse, actually. There was an incident with a bottle of claret and a particularly angry opera singer last month that— well, never mind." Despite everything, Penelope felt her lips twitch. "You're trying to make me laugh. Is it working?" "No." "Liar." She wiped her eyes with the handkerchief, then looked up at him. Adrian was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something fierce and protective and sad all at once. "Everyone else has abandoned me," she said quietly. "The invitations have all been cancelled. My so-called friends can't be bothered to call. Even my parents can barely look at me. But you came." "Of course I came." Adrian's voice was rough. "You're my oldest friend, Pen. Did you really think I'd leave you to face this alone?" "Most people would." "I'm not most people." "No." Penelope looked at him, really looked at him for the first time all day. His rumpled coat and his too long hair and his dark eyes that had seen her at her absolute worst and hadn't flinched. "No, you're not." A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with things neither of them quite knew how to say. Finally, Adrian spoke. "You deserved better than him." The words were simple, honest, and somehow they meant more than all the sympathy and platitudes the world could offer. "Yes," Penelope said softly, "I did." She looked down at her wedding gown, beautiful, expensive, and utterly pointless now. Then she looked back at Adrian, at her oldest friend who'd always told her the truth even when it wasn't what she wanted to hear, and something shifted inside her, something sharp and reckless and absolutely done with being perfect. "Adrian," she said slowly, an idea beginning to form in her mind, "how would you feel about helping me do something monumentally stupid?" His eyebrows rose. "How stupid are we talking?" The kind of stupid that would make my mother faint and my father disown me. The kind that would scandalise all of London. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Adrian's face, the smile that made dowagers clutch their pearls and debutantes fan themselves vigorously. "Penelope Harrington," he said. "I thought you'd never ask." Chapter 2. The Wild Idea. 2 months. 2 months of sitting in drawing rooms while her mother wept decorously into embroidered handkerchiefs. 2 months of her father's pointed silences and the servants' pitying glances. 2 months of watching invitations arrive for everyone in the household except her. 2 months of being treated like a ghost in her own life. Penelope sat by the window of her bedchamber watching rain streak down the glass and felt something inside her finally crack. It wasn't a dramatic break. No shattering, no explosion. Just a quiet, decisive fracture like ice giving way beneath too much pressure. She was done. "Miss Penelope?" Her maid, Mary, appeared in the doorway with yet another tea tray. "Your mother thought you might like some refreshment. She says perhaps you'd consider coming down for dinner tonight. Just family, of course. Your aunt is visiting, and she specifically asked." "Which aunt?" Mary hesitated. "Lady Thornbury, miss. Aunt Thornbury, who had 3 unmarried daughters of her own and had always looked at Penelope with barely concealed jealousy. Who would now descend upon the Harrington household like a vulture to feast on Penelope's downfall, while simultaneously ensuring her own daughters' reputations remained pristine by comparison. "Tell my mother I have a headache." "But miss, you've had a headache every night this week." "Then I suppose I'm simply plagued with them." Penelope stood abruptly, startling Mary so badly the tea tray rattled. "Actually, no. Tell her I'm indisposed. Tell her I've contracted consumption. Tell her I've decided to join a convent. Tell her whatever you like. But I will not sit through another dinner listening to Aunt Thornbury cluck her tongue and say, 'What a pity,' while secretly rejoicing that her daughters still have prospects." Mary's eyes went wide. "Miss Penelope? I know. Terribly rude of me." Penelope began pacing, energy suddenly flooding through her after weeks of lethargy. "But I find I no longer care about being rude, or proper, or any of the 1,000 other things I've spent my entire life being." "You're not yourself, miss. The heartbreak is the only honest thing that's happened to me in years." Penelope stopped pacing and turned to face her maid. "Do you know what I realised today, Mary?" The maid shook her head mutely. "I spent 22 years being perfect. Perfect posture, perfect manners, perfect accomplishments. I learned to paint in watercolours, even though I hate watercolours. I played the pianoforte until my fingers ached because young ladies are supposed to be musical. I embroidered cushions I'll never use and read poetry I didn't understand, and smiled at men who bored me senseless. And for what?" Her voice had risen, and she forced it back down, but the words kept coming, unstoppable now. "I did everything right, Mary. Everything society demanded. And Edmund still left me at the altar. Society still turned their backs on me. I've been ruined, and I didn't even get to enjoy being ruinous." Mary clutched the tea tray like a shield. "What are you saying, miss?" What was she saying? Penelope's mind raced, thoughts tumbling over each other like water over rocks. She thought about Adrian, 2 months ago, holding her while she sobbed. The way he'd looked at her when he said, "How would you feel about helping me do something monumentally stupid?" She'd been too raw that night to take him up on it, had thanked him for coming, sent him home, retreated back into her safe, miserable shell. But safety had gotten her nowhere. Misery had gained her nothing. "I'm saying," Penelope said slowly, the idea crystallizing even as she spoke, "that if I'm going to be ruined, I might as well earn it." 3 hours later, Penelope stood outside Adrian's townhouse in Mayfair, unchaperoned. In the middle of the afternoon, it was already scandalous. She loved it. The rain had stopped, leaving the cobblestones slick and gleaming. A few passers-by gave her curious looks. A young lady alone without even a maid, standing before the notorious Lord Ashcroft's residence. By tomorrow half the ton would know. Good. Penelope lifted the brass knocker and brought it down 3 times, sharp and decisive. The door opened almost immediately. Adrian's butler, an elderly man with magnificent side whiskers and an expression of perpetual disapproval, looked at her with the kind of horror usually reserved for discovering rats in the pantry. Miss Harrington. His tone suggested he was seriously questioning whether she was in fact a miss anymore, given her shocking lack of propriety. "Good afternoon, Graves. Is Lord Ashcroft receiving?" "His lordship is." Graves paused delicately, indisposed. From somewhere inside the house came a loud crash, followed by Adrian's voice shouting something uncomplimentary about the entire equine species. "He sounds very disposed to me," Penelope said pleasantly. "I'll see myself in, shall I?" She swept past the sputtering butler before he could protest, following the sound of destruction to what proved to be Adrian's study. The scene that greeted her would have been comical if she weren't on a mission. Adrian stood in the centre of the room, dressed in shirt sleeves and breeches, his cravat discarded entirely, holding a riding crop and glaring at a stack of papers that appeared to have been thrown across the desk with considerable force. A decanter of what looked like brandy sat at his elbow, already half empty despite the early hour. He looked up when she entered, and his expression cycled through surprise, pleasure, and alarm in rapid succession. "Penelope? What are you? Did you come here alone?" "Yes." "Without a chaperone?" "Obviously." "In broad daylight? It's 2:30. When else would I come?" Adrian set down the riding crop very carefully, as though it might explode. "Your reputation is already destroyed, or have you forgotten?" Penelope closed the study door behind her with a decisive click. "Besides, I'm not here for a social call." He studied her for a long moment, and she watched him catalogue the changes. She dressed carefully for this visit, not in the sombre greys and lavenders she'd been wearing for weeks, but in a deep blue walking dress that brought out the colour of her eyes. She'd told Mary to arrange her hair in a style that was fashionable rather than demure. She'd even added a touch of rouge to her lips when the maid wasn't looking. She looked, she knew, rather good. And from the way Adrian's gaze darkened slightly, he'd noticed. "Why are you here, Pen?" She took a breath. This was it. The moment that would either save her or finish destroying her, and frankly, she'd take either over the slow suffocation of the past 2 months. "I want you to teach me how to be wicked." The silence that followed was spectacular. Adrian stared at her, blinked, stared some more. Then he picked up the brandy decanter and took a long drink directly from it. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me." "I heard words," Adrian said carefully, setting down the decanter. "But they couldn't possibly have meant what I think they meant." "I want you to teach me." "Yes, I got that part." He ran a hand through his already dishevelled hair. "Penelope, sit down, please." She sat in one of the leather armchairs near the fireplace. Adrian remained standing, which gave him the height advantage, but she refused to be intimidated. This was too important. "Let me make sure I understand," Adrian said, his voice taking on the excessively calm tone of someone addressing a possibly deranged person. "You want me specifically, to teach you how to be wicked." "Precisely. And by wicked, you mean, everything proper young ladies aren't supposed to do?" Penelope leaned forward, warming to her subject. "Gambling, drinking champagne, dancing too close, saying inappropriate things, wearing scandalous gowns, attending events I shouldn't attend, meeting people I shouldn't meet." She paused, feeling heat rise in her cheeks, but pushing forward anyway. "Perhaps even taking a lover, though I'd need to work up to that, I think." Adrian made a strangled sound and reached for the brandy again. "This is insane," he said after another long drink. "This is the worst idea you've ever had, and that includes the time you convinced me to help you borrow your father's carriage so we could drive to the village fair. We had a wonderful time at that fair. We nearly overturned the carriage into a ditch. But we didn't. We made it there and back, and no one ever knew." Penelope stood, moving closer to him. "Adrian, listen to me. I've spent 2 months being the perfect victim of scandal. Staying home, being quiet, waiting for society to forgive me for the terrible crime of being publicly humiliated. That's what you're supposed to do? Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Why is that what I'm supposed to do? Edmund destroyed my reputation through no fault of my own, and I'm the one who has to hide. I'm the one who has to apologise. I'm the one who has to spend years being grateful if some elderly widower decides I'm cheap enough to be worth the scandal." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's not. It is, and you know it." She was standing right in front of him now, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I played by all the rules, Adrian. Every single one, and it got me nothing but heartbreak and shame. So I'm done. If I'm going to be ruined anyway, I want to actually enjoy being ruinous. Penelope, I have a list, she continued, pulling a folded piece of paper from her reticule. Things I've always wanted to do, but never could because proper young ladies don't. Gaming hells, masquerade balls, opera boxes where people do more than watch the performance. I want to drink too much and dance until dawn and say exactly what I think instead of simpering behind my fan. She thrust the list at him. Adrian took it automatically, then stared at it as though it might bite him. This is... He scanned the page, his eyebrows climbing steadily higher. Good God, Penelope. Half of these things would get you actually ruined, not just socially awkward. I know. Your father would disown you. He barely speaks to me now anyway. Your mother would have an apoplexy. She already requires laudanum twice daily. What's a bit more? You could be seriously hurt. I'm already hurt. The words burst out of her, raw and honest. I'm already bleeding, Adrian. I'm already broken. And I am so tired of pretending I'm not. I'm tired of being perfect. I'm tired of being proper. I'm tired of being sorry for things I didn't do. Her voice cracked, and she hated it, but she pushed on. I just want to feel something other than shame. Is that really so terrible? Adrian set the list down on his desk without looking at it. His expression was unreadable. Why me? He asked quietly. Because you're the wickedest person I know. That's not a recommendation, Pen. And because you're my oldest friend. She softened her voice, let him see the vulnerability beneath the bravado. Because I trust you. Because you're the only person in the entire world who looked at me 2 months ago and didn't see a failure or a scandal or a cautionary tale. You just saw me. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. You don't know what you're asking, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Then tell me. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his words were careful, measured. The places I go, Penelope, they're not safe for innocent young ladies. The people I associate with don't play by society's rules because they don't care about society. You could be taken advantage of, compromised, actually ruined in ways that go far beyond a broken engagement. I'll have you with me. I'm not. He stopped, seemed to reconsider. I'm not a good man, Pen. I know we've been friends since childhood, but the boy who fished with you in Kent is not the same person standing here now. I've done things that would shock you. Been with women who would eat you alive for sport. I drink too much, I gamble too deeply, and I don't give a damn what anyone thinks of me. Good, Penelope said firmly. Then you're exactly the right person to teach me not to give a damn either. This is madness, probably. Your reputation will be in shreds. It already is. People will say we're lovers. Let them. She lifted her chin. I'm done caring what people say, Adrian. I'm done being small and quiet and grateful. I want to be big and loud and gloriously inappropriate. And I want you to show me how. Adrian stared at her for so long she thought he might refuse. She could see the war playing out on his face, responsibility warring with something else, something that looked almost like longing. Finally, he let out a long breath. If we do this, and I mean if, we have rules. Hope flared in Penelope's chest. Name them. 1, I control where we go and what we do. If I say something's too dangerous, that's final. No arguments. Agreed. 2, we do this for 1 month, 4 weeks, no more. After that, you go back to being a respectable lady and find yourself a respectable husband. She wanted to argue that point, but nodded instead. She could worry about month 2 later. 3, if I say we're done at any point, if this gets too dangerous or too public, or if you get hurt, we stop immediately, no negotiation. Fine. And 4, he stepped closer, his expression deadly serious. You tell no one, not your maid, not your mother, not your dearest confidante. No one can know about this arrangement except us. The moment word gets out, it's over. Understood? Understood. Adrian studied her face as though looking for any sign of doubt. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he finally, slowly nodded. Then God help us both, he muttered. When do you want to start? Penelope smiled, really smiled, for the first time in 2 months. Tonight? Tonight? Adrian looked alarmed. Penelope, I need time to plan, to make arrangements. Tonight, she repeated firmly. I've wasted 2 months already. I'm not wasting another day. She could see him wavering, knew the exact moment he gave in. You're going to be the death of me, Penelope Harrington. Quite possibly, she agreed cheerfully, but you'll have fun first. Adrian shook his head, but she caught the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. I'll send a carriage at 9 o'clock. Tell your parents you're retiring early with a headache. Wear something you can move in, and for God's sake, bring a cloak with a hood. If anyone recognizes you where we're going, all the rules in the world won't save your reputation. Where are we going? His smile widened into something wicked and wonderful. You want to learn to be scandalous, Pen? Then we start with the most essential skill, how to lose at cards without losing your dignity. After she left, slipping out the servant's entrance like a thief, the thrill of it fizzing in her veins, Adrian returned to his study and poured himself another drink. Then he looked at Penelope's list, still lying on his desk. Gaming hells, masquerade balls, dancing until dawn, opera boxes, champagne, forbidden books, midnight rides, learning to swear properly, kissing someone who actually wants to kiss me back. That last one hit him like a fist to the chest. This will be the end of me, he said to the empty room. But even as he said it, he was already planning their first lesson, already thinking about which gaming hell would be safest, already wondering what Penelope would look like when she won her first hand of cards, already, God help him, looking forward to it. Chapter 3. Lessons in Ruin. The carriage arrived at precisely 9 o'clock. Penelope had feigned her headache with such theatrical conviction that even her mother seemed convinced, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead and murmuring about the delicate constitutions of heartbroken young ladies. The moment her bedchamber door closed, Penelope was up and moving with military precision. She changed into her simplest day dress, dark green wool that wouldn't show dirt or draw attention. Over it went the cloak Adrian had specified, heavy velvet with a deep hood that shadowed her face completely. She looked like she was headed to a clandestine meeting with a lover, which in a way she supposed she was, just not the romantic kind. Though when she caught sight of herself in the looking glass, pulse racing and eyes bright with anticipation, she had to admit the effect was rather thrilling. Mary was visiting her sister for the evening. Penelope had made sure of it, slipping her an extra half-crown for the trip. The servants would assume she was sleeping. Her parents never checked on her after she'd retired anyway. They seemed to prefer pretending she didn't exist. Perfect. She slipped down the servants' stairs, out through the kitchen garden and into the waiting carriage before anyone could spot her. Adrian was already inside. Right on time, he said as she settled onto the seat across from him. Even in the dim interior, she could see he'd dressed down for the occasion. Dark coat, simple waistcoat, cravat tied with none of his usual careless elegance. He looked almost respectable. Almost. Where are we going? She asked, trying to keep the eagerness from her voice and failing utterly. The Gilded Rose. At her blank look, he added, It's a gaming hell, semi-respectable as these things go. Ladies do occasionally venture there, provided they have male protection and don't mind having their reputations thoroughly questioned. Sounds perfect. Adrian's lips twitched. You're entirely too excited about this. I've been trapped in drawing rooms for 2 months, Adrian. A den of sin sounds positively heavenly by comparison. She leaned forward conspiratorially. Will there be hardened gamblers? Fallen women? Men with eye patches? Probably not eye patches. Pity. I was hoping for eye patches. He laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and something in Penelope's chest loosened. This was right. This mad, reckless, utterly inappropriate adventure was exactly what she needed. The carriage rolled through increasingly questionable neighbourhoods until it stopped before a townhouse that looked deceptively ordinary from the outside. Only the steady stream of well-dressed men entering and leaving suggested anything untoward. Adrian helped her down, his hand warm through her glove. Remember, keep your hood up, speak to no one unless I introduce them, and for God's sake, don't tell anyone your real name. What should I call myself? He considered. Miss Smith? Boring. Miss Jones? Worse. Fine, you pick. Penelope thought for a moment, then smiled wickedly. Lady Scandal, Adrian groaned. Absolutely not. Lady Trouble? Penelope. Miss Delacroix, then. French. Mysterious. Possibly a widow. You're 22. A very young widow. Tragic story. Don't ask about it. Despite himself, Adrian grinned. Fine, but if anyone does ask, your tragic late husband died of spontaneous combustion. I'm reconsidering this entire arrangement. Too late. We're already here. She swept past him toward the entrance, cloak billowing dramatically behind her. She heard him mutter something that sounded distinctly like, God help me, but he followed. The interior of the Gilded Rose was nothing like Penelope had imagined. She'd expected something dark and sordid, all shadows and vice. Instead, she found a warmly lit series of rooms decorated with surprising taste. Thick carpets, muffled footsteps. Crystal chandeliers cast everything in golden light. Well-dressed men and women clustered around gaming tables, their laughter and conversation creating a pleasant hum. It was almost civilized. Disappointed? Adrian asked, clearly reading her expression. A little, she admitted. Where's the debauchery? Gaming hells have tiers, like everything else in London. This one caters to people who want to gamble without completely destroying their reputations. The truly debauched establishments are further east. He guided her toward a hazard table. We'll work our way up to those. A slim man with silver hair approached, his smile professionally warm. Lord Ashcroft, a pleasure as always, and you've brought a guest? Miss Delacroix, Adrian said smoothly. A friend visiting from Paris. I'm showing her some of London's more interesting entertainments. The man's eyes gleamed with understanding. Ah, how continental. Welcome, mademoiselle. Your first time gaming? Penelope considered lying, then decided against it. Is it that obvious? Only to those who know what to look for. He gestured toward the tables. Might I recommend 21 for beginners? The rules are simpler than Hazard, and the loss is less devastating. 21 it is, Adrian said, pressing a handful of coins into Penelope's palm. Consider this your stake. Try not to lose it all in the first 10 minutes. I'll do my best to restrain myself. They found seats at a table where a bored-looking dealer was shuffling cards with practiced efficiency. Two other players sat across from them, a woman in her 30s with calculating eyes and a young man who looked barely old enough to shave. The rules, as promised, were simple enough. Get as close to 21 as possible without going over. Beat the dealer's hand. Don't be an idiot about it. Penelope lost her first 3 hands spectacularly. You're supposed to stop drawing cards before you go over 21, Adrian murmured after she busted for the 3rd time. Thank you, I had worked that out. Just checking. You seem to be employing some sort of strategy that involved doing the exact opposite of winning. She elbowed him in the ribs. The woman across the table smirked. But then something clicked. Penelope had always been good with numbers, could calculate household accounts faster than her father's steward, could track patterns in things other people missed. She started paying attention not just to her own cards, but to what had already been played, started calculating odds in her head. She won the next hand, then the next. Beginner's luck, the young man across from them muttered when she won her 5th hand in a row. Must be, Penelope agreed sweetly, raking in her winnings. By the time they left the table an hour later, she'd turned Adrian's modest stake into £40. I think you might be a natural card sharp, Adrian said as they moved toward the refreshment room. He sounded impressed and slightly concerned in equal measure. Edmund always told me that ladies shouldn't concern themselves with mathematics, Penelope said, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. Said it made them unfeminine. Edmund was an idiot. Yes, he was. She looked at the money in her hand, more than she'd ever won at anything in her life, and felt giddiness bubble up in her chest. Adrian? Thank you. He glanced at her, something soft in his expression. For what? For not treating me like I'm broken, for not making me feel ashamed for wanting this. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, voice low, You were never broken, Pen. Just trapped. There's a difference. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the crowded gaming hell fell away. There was just him, looking at her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. Then someone jostled Adrian's shoulder, and the moment shattered. Come on, he said, clearing his throat. We should get you home before your parents discover you've escaped. 3 nights later, the masquerade. I look ridiculous. You look magnificent. I look like a peacock mated with a curtain. Adrian leaned against the doorframe of the retiring room, arms crossed, thoroughly enjoying himself. You insisted on the masquerade, Pen. This is what people wear to masquerades. Penelope turned in front of the mirror, examining the costume she'd procured through questionable means involving Mary's cousin, who worked for a theatrical company. The gown was deep sapphire silk, cut lower than anything she'd ever worn in public, with a skirt that showed a shocking amount of ankle when she moved. The matching mask covered the upper half of her face in swirls of silver and blue. She looked like a stranger, dangerous and beautiful and utterly free. She loved it. "Ready?" Adrian asked. He donned a simple black domino and mask, which somehow made him look even more rakish than usual. Penelope caught several women staring as they made their way through the ballroom. The masquerade was being held at Vauxhall Gardens, in one of the private pavilions reserved for those who could afford discretion. Lanterns hung from trees like captured stars. Music drifted from somewhere unseen. Couples danced in the open air while others disappeared down shadowed pathways. It was magical and scandalous in equal measure. "Lesson 2, Adrian said, offering his hand. "The waltz." Penelope's breath caught. "The waltz is perfectly respectable now. The waltz has danced in proper ballrooms under your mother's watchful eye is respectable." His smile was wicked behind his mask. "This is not that waltz." He led her to the dance floor, and the moment his hand settled on her waist, lower than propriety dictated, firm and possessive, Penelope understood what he meant. This was not a respectable waltz. They moved together through the other dancers, and Adrian held her far closer than any partner ever had. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him through the thin silk of her gown. Close enough that when they turned, her skirts tangled with his legs. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, even behind the mask. "You're a good dancer," she said, slightly breathless. "You sound surprised." "I suppose I expected rogues to be terrible at things requiring grace and coordination. We save our lack of grace for more important activities: gambling, drinking, seducing opera singers." Something hot and uncomfortable twisted in Penelope's stomach at the mention of seduction. She pushed it away. "Is that your usual evening, then? Cards, brandy, and opera singers?" "More or less." His hand pressed more firmly against her back as they spun. "Although recently I've been spending my evenings teaching respectable young ladies how to be scandalous. It's proving far more entertaining." "Am I entertaining you?" "Vastly." His voice dropped lower. "You're also making me reconsider several of my life choices, but we'll address that later." Before Penelope could ask what he meant, the music swelled into the final movement. Adrian pulled her into a turn that was just shy of improper, her body pressed against his for one dizzying moment. When the music ended, they were both breathing harder than the dance warranted. "Well," Penelope managed. "That was—" "Yes," Adrian agreed. "It was." They didn't discuss what it was. Didn't need to. Later, when they'd found a quieter corner and Penelope had kicked off her dancing slippers to rest her aching feet, she realised she was laughing. Really, truly laughing, the kind that made her stomach hurt and tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "What's so funny?" Adrian asked, but he was smiling. "I don't know. Everything. Nothing." She wiped at her eyes, careful not to dislodge her mask. "I just realised I can't remember the last time I laughed like this. Before tonight, I mean, before all of this. Not even with Edmund, especially not with Edmund." She sobered slightly. "I thought I was happy with him, you know. I thought I was doing everything right, but I never laughed with him. Not like this. I'm not sure I even liked him very much, if I'm being honest." "Why did you agree to marry him then?" Penelope considered the question. A month ago she would have deflected it, but tonight, with the mask giving her courage and Adrian's steady presence beside her, she found herself being honest. Because it was what I was supposed to do. Marry well, manage a household, produce heirs, host dinner parties. Edmund was suitable, that was enough. She looked at Adrian. Or I thought it was enough. Turns out I wanted more than suitable. I just didn't realise it until suitable left me at the altar. Adrian's jaw tightened. He's still an arse. The biggest. She nudged his shoulder with hers. But if he hadn't left, I'd be married to him right now. Living a perfectly respectable, perfectly miserable life. So in a strange way, him jilting me might be the best thing that ever happened to me. That's a remarkably charitable interpretation. I'm feeling charitable tonight. She stretched her arms above her head, relishing the freedom of movement the costume allowed. I won at cards. I danced scandalously. I'm sitting in Vauxhall Gardens with London's most notorious rake, and I don't feel even slightly ashamed. You shouldn't feel ashamed, Adrian said quietly. You've done nothing wrong. Society disagrees. Society isn't people too afraid to live their own lives, so they spend their time judging others for living theirs. He met her eyes. Don't let them make you small, Pen. You're too magnificent for that. The words hit her directly in the chest. No one had ever called her magnificent before. Accomplished, yes. Pretty, certainly. Well-bred, often. But magnificent? That was new. Thank you, she whispered. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the music drift from the pavilion until Penelope realized she was leaning against Adrian's shoulder and he had one arm resting loosely around her waist. When had that happened, and why did it feel so perfectly natural? 5 days later, the garden party. How many glasses of champagne have you had? Not nearly enough. Penelope plucked another glass from a passing servant's tray. This is only my fourth? I've lost count. That's because you've had too many. Nonsense. I'm she hiccuped, perfectly fine. Adrian looked at her with the expression of a man who knew he was in trouble but couldn't quite figure out how to escape it. They were at Lady Rothschild's garden party, an event known for its relaxed standards and liberal application of alcohol. Penelope had been enthralled by the whole thing, the elaborate decorations, the scandalous gossip, the way people danced on the lawn with their shoes off. She'd also discovered she quite liked champagne. Rather a lot, actually. Right, Adrian said, gently removing the glass from her hand. We're going to take a little walk. Get some fresh air. We're already outside. Fresher air, away from the champagne fountain. He guided her toward a more secluded part of the garden, one hand at her elbow to keep her steady. Penelope felt pleasantly warm and fizzy, like the champagne itself had gotten into her bloodstream. They found a bench beneath a willow tree, hidden from the main party by a curtain of trailing branches. Better? Adrian asked as she sat down, perhaps less gracefully than intended. Much. She tilted her head back to look at the sky through the leaves. You know what I realized? What's that? I was so boring before, desperately, tragically boring. I talked about the weather and needlework and who was dancing with whom. I never said anything interesting or true or real. You weren't boring. I was. She sat up too quickly and the world spun slightly. I was exactly what everyone wanted me to be, and I thought that made me interesting, but it just made me invisible. Do you know Edmund never asked me what I actually thought about anything? He just assumed I agreed with him. And I let him. I let everyone assume I was just this perfect empty vessel they could pour their expectations into. Adrian's expression had gone serious. You're not empty, Pen. I know that now. She reached out, took his hand without thinking about it. But I didn't know it before all of this, before you. Before me? You're the only person who's ever let me be messy and complicated and angry, who didn't tell me I was being too much or not enough, who just let me be. She was saying too much. She knew she was saying too much. The champagne had loosened her tongue and stripped away the careful barriers she usually maintained, but she couldn't seem to stop. Sometimes I'm terrified, she admitted, voice dropping to almost a whisper. Terrified that the month will be over and I'll have to go back to being proper Penelope. Terrified that I'll forget how this feels, this freedom. That I'll end up marrying some man who wants a decoration for his dinner table, and I'll spend the rest of my life pretending I'm not dying inside. Adrian's thumb moved in slow circles on the back of her hand. You won't. You're too stubborn to let that happen. Am I? Impossibly stubborn. It's one of your finest qualities. She laughed softly. I've made a mess of things, haven't I? My reputation, my prospects, my entire life. You've made your life your own, Adrian corrected. That's not a mess. That's bravery. Penelope looked at him, really looked at him, at the way the dappled sunlight caught in his dark hair, at the scar on his jaw from the duel he'd fought 3 years ago, at the way he was looking at her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. Adrian? I'm very glad Edmund left me at the altar. He blinked. You are? If he hadn't, I wouldn't be here, with you, doing this. She squeezed his hand. I'd be Mrs. Edmund Cartwright, hosting tea parties and pretending to be happy. Instead, I'm Miss Delacroix, winning at cards and dancing until dawn and drinking too much champagne in secret gardens. I think I prefer this version. Even if it means scandal? Especially if it means scandal. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, voice rough, "You're going to break my heart, Penelope Harrington." The words hit her strangely, settling somewhere deep in her chest. Before she could ask what he meant, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. "Tired," she mumbled, listing sideways. Adrian caught her before she could topple off the bench. "Right, time to get you home." "Don't want to go home. Want to stay here with you." "You can't sleep in Lady Rothschild's garden." "Why not? Seems perfectly nice." Despite his exasperation, Penelope heard him laugh softly. "Come on, you impossible woman. Up we go." He helped her to the carriage, settled her on the seat with a blanket tucked around her shoulders. The motion of the vehicle combined with the champagne proved too much. Penelope's eyes drifted shut. The last thing she felt before sleep claimed her was Adrian's shoulder beneath her cheek, solid and warm, and his hand carefully smoothing her hair back from her face. If she'd been more awake, she might have noticed the way his touch lingered, the way he looked at her like she was something infinitely precious. But she was asleep, so she missed it. Adrian, however, was wide awake and thoroughly, terrifyingly aware that he was in far deeper than he'd ever intended. 2 weeks later, the opera. "I didn't know you had a box at the opera." "I don't. I'm borrowing this one from Rothschild. He owes me a favour." Penelope settled into her seat, looking around the private box with interest. They were in the upper galleries, not quite respectable, but not entirely scandalous either. The kind of place where rogues brought their mistresses and married women met their lovers. The kind of place where no one looked too closely at who was with whom. Perfect for their purposes. "What are we seeing?" she asked as the theatre filled. "Does it matter?" "I suppose not," she grinned. "We're not actually here to watch the opera, are we?" "You're learning." Adrian leaned back in his seat, utterly relaxed. The opera is where society pretends to be cultured while actually engaging in the most spectacular gossip and intrigue. The performance is almost beside the point. Then what's the point? Being seen, making connections, and... He gestured toward the box across from theirs, where a portly gentleman was very obviously not watching the stage, conducting business of various sorts. Penelope was about to ask what sort of business when the curtain rose and the performance began. She'd been to the opera before, of course, dozens of times, but always in her family's respectable box, surrounded by respectable people, expected to sit respectfully through the entire performance. This was different. The upper galleries hummed with barely suppressed energy. People moved between boxes during the performance. Bottles of wine appeared from seemingly nowhere, and the amount of kissing happening in shadowed corners was truly astounding. "Good heavens," Penelope murmured. "Is that Lord Pemberton with Lady—" "Don't look directly at them," Adrian advised. "Trust me." At intermission, Penelope was thoroughly enjoying herself, people watching with abandon and providing Adrian with running commentary on the various scandals unfolding around them. Then a woman appeared in the entrance to their box, and everything changed. She was stunning in the way that made other women hate her on sight. Lush curves poured into a crimson gown that left absolutely nothing to the imagination, dark hair piled artfully atop her head, full lips curved in a knowing smile. "Adrian, caro mio," she purred, her Italian accent thick as honey. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Penelope watched Adrian's expression shift into something carefully neutral. "Valentina, I wasn't expecting you tonight." "Clearly." Valentina's dark eyes swept over Penelope with the kind of assessment women usually reserve for potential rivals. "You have company. How unexpected." There was a long, loaded pause. "Miss Delacroix," Adrian said finally, "may I present Signora Valentina Rossini? Valentina, Miss Delacroix, a friend from Kent." Penelope's stomach had gone cold. She didn't need Adrian to spell it out. The way Valentina looked at him, the familiar way she said his name, the possessiveness in her stance. This was Adrian's mistress, the opera singer he'd mentioned in passing. She was beautiful, sophisticated, everything Penelope wasn't. "Charmed," Valentina said, though her tone suggested she was anything but. She turned back to Adrian, dismissing Penelope entirely. I thought we had plans for this evening, Tesoro, our usual arrangement. Her hand settled on Adrian's shoulder, fingers trailing down his arm in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate. Something hot and vicious coiled in Penelope's chest. Jealousy, she realized with a start. She was jealous. She had absolutely no right to be jealous. Adrian was free to have mistresses. This was just an arrangement between friends. She had no claim on him whatsoever. So why did she want to shove Valentina off the balcony? Plans changed, Adrian said, his voice still carefully neutral. He shifted away from Valentina's touch, subtle, but Penelope noticed. I'm otherwise engaged tonight. Valentina's smile tightened. I can see that, but surely Miss Delacroix wouldn't mind if you took a brief intermission, for old time's sake? She let her hand drift lower to the small of Adrian's back, and Penelope's fingers clenched on her fan hard enough to make the ivory sticks creak. Adrian caught Penelope's eye, and something passed between them. A question, maybe, or an acknowledgement. Then he stood, gently but firmly removing Valentina's hand. Not tonight, Valentina. I'm sorry. The opera singer's expression went from sultry to sharp in an instant. You're sorry? I'll call on you later this week. We can discuss. Discuss what exactly? Valentina's voice had risen slightly, drawing attention from neighbouring boxes. How you've replaced me with some English putana from Kent. Watch your mouth, Adrian said, his voice going dangerously quiet. Penelope stood as well, drawing herself up to her full height. I think you should leave, Signora. Valentina laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Oh, I'll leave. But you should know, Cara, that Adrian grows bored quickly. A month from now, he'll have forgotten your name. That's what he does. That's what rogues like him always do. She swept out in a rustle of crimson silk, leaving silence in her wake. Penelope sat down slowly, her heart pounding. That was... I'm sorry, Adrian said, running a hand through his hair. She wasn't supposed to be here tonight. I didn't think... You chose me. The words came out before Penelope could stop them. She offered you, whatever your usual arrangement is, and you chose to stay with me instead. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Of course I did. Why? Because you're my friend. Because I promised to teach you, not abandon you for... He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. Because I'd rather be here with you than anywhere else. The last part was said so quietly that Penelope almost missed it. Almost. The second half of the opera passed in a blur. Penelope was acutely aware of Adrian beside her, of the way he'd chosen her over his beautiful, sophisticated mistress, of the strange, fluttering feeling in her chest that definitely wasn't just friendship. When they finally left the theatre, stepping out into the cool night air, Adrian helped her into the carriage with the same careful courtesy he always showed. But as they pulled away, Penelope glanced back and saw Valentina standing in the theatre entrance, watching them with narrowed eyes. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this wouldn't be the last they heard from Signora Valentina Rossini. The next morning. The gossip reached Penelope before she'd even finished breakfast. Her mother burst into the morning room, clutching a letter and looking like she might faint. Penelope, please tell me this isn't true. Penelope set down her tea carefully. What isn't true? Lady Pemberton writes that you were seen at the opera last night in the upper galleries with Lord Ashcroft. Her mother's voice trembled. Please tell me you have not been so foolish as to... I've been seeing Lord Ashcroft, yes. Penelope kept her voice steady. He's been helping me navigate society after the wedding disaster. Navigate society? Her father appeared in the doorway, his face thunderous. Is that what you call gallivanting about town unchaperoned with the most notorious rake in London? Adrian is my friend. Adrian, her father repeated, latching onto the familiar use of his name. Good God, Penelope, the scandal with Cartwright was bad enough. But this... People are saying you're Ashcroft's mistress, that you've been carrying on with him for weeks, that the reason Cartwright left you was because you were already compromised. Each word hit like a physical blow. But Penelope straightened her spine and met her father's furious gaze. People will say whatever they wish. They've been talking about me for months already. At least now I'm actually doing something worth gossiping about. Her mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Her father's face went from red to purple. You will cease all contact with Lord Ashcroft immediately, he said, each word clipped and final. You will comport yourself with appropriate contrition, and you will accept the first respectable offer that comes your way, even if it's from a man 3 times your age. Do I make myself clear? Penelope thought about the past few weeks, about winning at cards and dancing until dawn and laughing until her stomach hurt, about Adrian's steady presence and the way he looked at her like she was magnificent instead of ruined. No, she said quietly. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. What did you say? Her father asked, his voice dangerously soft. I said no. Penelope stood, her hands shaking but her voice steady. I will not stop seeing Adrian. I will not apologize for living my life, and I will certainly not marry some elderly widower just to salvage a reputation that was destroyed through no fault of my own. Then you leave me no choice. Her father's expression went cold. Until you come to your senses, you are not welcome in this house. Pack your things. I want you gone by nightfall. Thomas, her mother gasped, you cannot be serious. I am utterly serious. He turned on his heel and strode from the room without another word. Penelope stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Her father had disowned her, actually disowned her. She should feel devastated, terrified, lost. Instead, she felt strangely free. Her mother was weeping now, but Penelope barely heard her. She was already making plans. She had the £40 from the gaming hell, plus a few pieces of jewellery she could sell. She had a friend who might take her in, at least temporarily. She had Adrian. And right now, that felt like more than enough. Chapter 4. The world attacks. The scandal spread through London like wildfire in dry grass. By the next afternoon, Penelope's name was on every tongue in every drawing room across Mayfair. The stories grew more salacious with each retelling. She'd been Adrian's mistress for months. She'd driven Edmund away with her wanton behaviour. She'd been seen in gaming hells, brothels, opium dens. One particularly creative rumour claimed she'd run away to join a travelling circus. Penelope discovered this when she arrived at her friend Diana's townhouse, her meagre belongings packed into 2 trunks that currently sat in a hired hack. Diana's butler took one look at her and actually stepped back, as though scandal might be contagious. I'm sorry, Miss Harrington, he said, not sounding sorry at all. Lady Diana is not at home. She told me yesterday she'd be home all week. Not at home. The door closed in her face with decisive finality. Penelope stood on the steps, her cheeks burning. Diana had been her friend since childhood, had apparently decided that friendship wasn't worth the social cost. She tried 3 more houses, got 3 more doors closed in her face. By the time she found herself back in the hack, directing the driver to the only place she could think of, her hands were shaking and her throat was tight. She refused to cry, refused to give them the satisfaction. But God, it hurt. Adrian's butler opened the door and actually smiled when he saw her. Miss Harrington, his lordship is in his study. I'll see myself in. Thank you, Graves. She found Adrian exactly where she'd expected, slouched in his chair, a glass of whiskey in one hand, staring at nothing. He looked up when she entered, and his expression cycled through several emotions too quickly to track before settling on carefully neutral. Pen, I didn't expect. He stopped, taking in her appearance properly, the simple travelling dress, the dust on her hem, the way her hair had started to slip from its pins. What happened? My father's disowned me. My friends won't receive me, and apparently I'm either your mistress or a circus performer, depending on which version of the gossip one believes. She sat down in the chair across from him without waiting for an invitation. So, how was your morning? Adrian set down his glass very carefully. He actually disowned you? Gave me until nightfall to pack my things. Very dramatic. My mother cried, which I think was more about the scandal than actual concern for my welfare. She tried for a light tone and almost managed it. I'm officially ruined now. Properly ruined. The kind of ruin that doesn't pack from garden parties and champagne. Penelope, don't. She held up a hand. Don't apologise. Don't tell me this is your fault. I made my choices. I knew the risks. Did you? Adrian leaned forward, his expression intense. Because I don't think you understood how vicious they'd be, how quickly they'd turn on you. You warned me. Clearly not emphatically enough. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognise as his tell for distress. Where are you staying? I was rather hoping you might have a suggestion. All my friends have suddenly discovered I'm contagious. The look that crossed Adrian's face was murderous. Who? Diana, Margaret, Catherine, and Anne. 4 for 4. Quite impressive, really, the speed with which former friends can become strangers. She tried to smile. I should have bet on it. Could have made a fortune. This isn't funny. No, she agreed quietly. It's really not. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Adrian stood, began pacing. My aunt has a townhouse in Bloomsbury. She's in Bath for the season. I can send word, have her staff prepare rooms for you. I can't accept that. Why not? Because it will make the gossip worse. Ashcroft's ruined mistress, living in a house he's provided. I don't give a damn about the gossip! The words exploded out of him, sharp and vehement. Penelope blinked. Adrian stopped pacing, his jaw tight. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less intense. I don't care what they say about me, Pen. I never have. But you... He broke off, seemed to struggle for words. You shouldn't have to pay for my reputation, for my mistakes. These aren't your mistakes, they're mine. I chose this. You chose adventure, not exile. Perhaps exile is just adventure with worse accommodations. Despite everything, Adrian's lips twitched. You're impossible, so I've been told. She stood as well, suddenly exhausted. The townhouse in Bloomsbury sounds lovely, actually, thank you. He crossed to her, and for a moment she thought he might embrace her. Instead, he just stood close, his dark eyes searching her face. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Truly? Was she? Penelope took inventory, disowned, friendless, her reputation in tatters, her future uncertain at best. I've been better, she admitted. But I've also been worse. At least now I know who my real friends are. And who's that? You. She met his gaze steadily. Just you, apparently, but you're worth a dozen fair-weather friends. Something flickered in Adrian's expression, pleasure and pain and something else she couldn't name. I'll arrange everything, he said. The townhouse, a stipend for expenses, staff who won't gossip. Adrian, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He stepped back, creating distance between them. You're my oldest friend, Pen. Let me do this. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could manage on her own, sell her jewellery, find work somehow. But the truth was, she was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being strong, tired of pretending everything was fine when her world kept crumbling. All right, she said softly. Thank you. 3 days later, the Dowager Viscountess Ashcroft arrived in London like a force of nature, unannounced, imperious, and clearly on a mission. Adrian was in his study when Graves appeared, looking genuinely alarmed. Your mother is here, my lord. Adrian's head snapped up. What? The Dowager. She's in the drawing room. She says she'll wait all day if necessary. Christ. Adrian set aside the ledgers he'd been pretending to review. Send her in. She requested you come to her, sir. Of course she did. He found his mother standing by the window, elegant in slate-grey silk, her posture ramrod straight despite her 60 years. She didn't turn when he entered. Mother, this is unexpected. Is it? The Dowager finally looked at him, her sharp eyes missing nothing. The entire county is talking about how my son has ruined yet another respectable young lady. I thought I should investigate before the gossip reaches the Prince Regent. Penelope isn't ruined, not really. She's living in your aunt's townhouse. Her own father has disowned her. Half of London thinks she's your mistress. His mother's tone could have cut glass. How, precisely, is that not ruined? Adrian's jaw tightened. She needed help. I helped her. You're playing with fire, Adrian. I'm helping a friend. You're lying to yourself. The Dowager crossed to him, her expression softening slightly. I know you, my darling boy, better than you know yourself sometimes, and I can see what's happening here. Nothing here. Nothing's happening. You care for her. It wasn't a question. More than you're admitting, more than is wise. Adrian opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. His mother waited. She's my friend, he said finally. I've known her since we were children. Catherine was your friend once too. The name landed like a blow. Adrian flinched. This is nothing like Catherine. Isn't it? His mother's voice was gentle now, which somehow made it worse. You're opening your heart again, Adrian, and I'm terrified that when this arrangement ends badly, which it will destroy you both. It won't end badly. In 2 weeks, the month is up. Penelope will return to society, find a respectable match eventually, and will go back to being friends. Do you truly believe that? Yes. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. His mother studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. You're a grown man. I cannot tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. That girl is in love with you. Adrian's heart stuttered. She's not. And unless I'm very much mistaken, you're in love with her too. You're both simply too stubborn or too frightened to admit it. She moved toward the door, then paused. Be careful, darling. Love is a gift, but it's also a weapon, and you've both already been wounded once. She swept out, leaving Adrian standing alone in the drawing room, his mother's words echoing in his head. That girl is in love with you. No, impossible. Penelope was grateful, certainly, enjoying their arrangement, absolutely. But love and him? In love with Penelope? The idea was ridiculous. He'd known her since they were children. She was his friend, his responsibility, nothing more. The fact that he'd been dreaming about her almost nightly meant nothing. The way his chest tightened whenever she smiled was just fondness. The jealousy that had burned through him when Valentina touched him at the opera was simple protectiveness. He wasn't in love with Penelope Harrington. He couldn't afford to be. Vauxhall Gardens, evening. You've been quiet tonight. Adrian glanced at Penelope walking beside him down one of Vauxhall's darkened paths. She was right, he had been quiet, too caught up in his own thoughts to provide his usual commentary. Tired, he said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Liar! She bumped his shoulder with hers. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Adrian! She stopped walking, forcing him to stop too. They were in a secluded grove, lit only by distant lanterns, the sound of music and laughter drifting from the main pavilions. Talk to me, please. He looked at her. Really looked at her. She was wearing another of her scandalous costumes, this one in deep emerald that made her eyes seem to glow. Her mask was silver and green, covering half her face, giving her an otherworldly quality. She was beautiful. When had she become so beautiful? My mother visited, he said finally. Ah, that would explain the brooding. Penelope moved to a nearby bench, sat down gracefully. What did the estimable dowager have to say? That I'm playing with fire, that this arrangement will end badly, that we're both going to get hurt. Cheerful woman, your mother. She's not wrong. Penelope was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Are you having regrets? No, yes, I don't know. Adrian sat beside her, suddenly exhausted. I didn't think this through, Pen. I thought I could give you a taste of freedom and then everything would go back to normal, but nothing's normal anymore. You've been disowned, your reputation is in shreds, and it's my fault. Stop. She turned to face him fully. None of this is your fault. I asked you to do this. I pushed you into it. I knew the risks. You thought there would be risks. You didn't know how bad it would actually be. No, she agreed. I didn't, but I don't regret it. Not any of it. You should. Well, I don't. She pulled off her mask, and the loss of it made her seem suddenly vulnerable. Do you want to know what I regret? What? Wasting 22 years being what everyone else wanted me to be. Marrying Edmund would have been the biggest waste of all. She reached out, her fingers finding his. These past weeks with you, they've been the most honest, most real, most alive I've ever felt. So no, Adrian, I don't regret any of it. Her hand was warm in his. Small and soft and trusting. He should let go, should put distance between them, should remember all the very good reasons why this was a terrible idea. Instead, he held on tighter. I'm afraid, he admitted, the words pulled from some deep, honest place he usually kept locked away. I'm afraid that you'll wake up one day and realize I'm exactly what everyone says I am. A rogue, a rake, someone who ruins things he touches, and you'll hate me for dragging you down with me, Adrian. Penelope shifted closer until their knees were touching. You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Don't you understand that? You shouldn't choose me. You deserve someone better. I don't want someone better. I want... She stopped, seemed to struggle for words. I want this. I want late nights and bad decisions and champagne-fueled confessions. I want to feel like myself instead of some perfect doll. And I feel most like myself when I'm with you. The space between them had shrunk somehow. Adrian could see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes, could count her eyelashes, could smell the jasmine scent of her perfume. You're going to break my heart, he said, echoing the words he'd said weeks ago in Lady Rothschild's garden. but this time they felt heavier, more true. Only if you break mine first. They were so close now, close enough that he could feel her breath on his lips. Close enough that the slightest movement would close the gap between them. He should move away, should stand up, should remember every reason why kissing Penelope Harrington was the worst possible idea. Penelope lifted one hand, her fingers trembling slightly as they touched his jaw. The gesture was tentative, questioning. "Teach me one more thing," she whispered. Adrian's heart was pounding so hard he was certain she could hear it. "What's that?" "Teach me what it feels like to be kissed by someone who actually wants me." The words shattered what little remained of his control. "Pen, please." Her thumb moved along his jaw, and the touch sent fire through his veins. "I just want to know, just once, what it feels like to be wanted. You are wanted." The confession tore out of him. "God help me, Penelope, you're so wanted it terrifies me." Her eyes widened. "Then show me." Adrian knew, with absolute certainty, that if he kissed her right now, everything would change. Their friendship, their arrangement, their entire futures, there would be no going back. He kissed her anyway. The first touch of his lips against hers was gentle, almost reverent. Then Penelope made a small sound, surprise or pleasure or both, and gentle went out the window. Adrian's hand came up to cup the back of her head, fingers tangling in her hair as he deepened the kiss. She tasted like champagne and strawberries and something uniquely her, something that made him want to memorize every detail of this moment. Penelope responded with an enthusiasm that would have been shocking if it weren't so perfect. Her hands fisted in his coat, pulling him closer, and when his tongue swept against her lower lip, she opened for him without hesitation. The kiss was nothing like the chaste embraces she'd shared with Edmund. This was consuming, desperate, absolutely devastating. Adrian kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life, like she was precious and dangerous and utterly essential. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Penelope's eyes were dazed and her lips were swollen and she looked thoroughly kissed. She breathed, "Yeah," Adrian managed. "Oh!" They stared at each other. The air between them crackled with tension and possibility and the weight of what they'd just done. Then reality crashed back in. Adrian stood abruptly, putting distance between them. His hands were shaking. "We can't." He stopped, started again. We shouldn't have." "Adrian, no." He ran both hands through his hair, making it stand on end. "This was a mistake. I shouldn't have. You don't want this. You don't want me." "How do you know what I want?" "Because I'm exactly what your father called me. A rogue, a scandal, someone who corrupts innocent young ladies for sport." "I'm hardly innocent anymore," Penelope pointed out, standing as well. "And I kissed you back, quite enthusiastically, if I recall correctly." "You're confused, grateful. You think you want this because I've shown you freedom, but that's not real." "Don't tell me what I think." Her voice rose, frustration clear in every syllable. "Don't tell me what I feel. I know my own mind, Adrian, and I know that kiss was real, the most real thing I've felt in my entire life." Adrian closed his eyes. When he opened them, his expression had shuttered, gone cold. "The month is almost over anyway. This arrangement, it's done. You should go back to being a respectable lady. Find a respectable husband, someone who can give you the life you deserve. I don't want. What you want and what's good for you are two different things." Each word felt like it was being pulled from him with pliers. "I'm not good for you, Pen. I never was. I'm sorry I forgot that." Penelope's face had gone pale. "You're ending this just like that?" "It was always going to end. We both knew that. But not like this. Not." Her voice cracked. "Adrian, please, can we at least talk about—" "There's nothing to talk about." He couldn't look at her. If he looked at her, he'd cave. He'd pull her back into his arms and kiss her again and damn the consequences. "I'll have my carriage take you home." "Good night, Miss Harrington." The formal address landed like a physical blow. Penelope took a step back, her hand pressed to her chest as though she'd been struck. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You're a coward." Adrian flinched but didn't respond. "I thought you were brave," she continued, and now there were tears in her voice. "I thought you were different, but you're just like everyone else. The moment things get real, you run. Penelope, no, you don't get to do this. You don't get to kiss me like that and then pretend it meant nothing." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was steady, strong. "You don't get to make me fall in love with you and then walk away because you're too frightened to feel something real." The words hung in the air between them. "Fall in love with you." Adrian's world tilted. "You don't love me," he said, but even he could hear how hollow it sounded. "Don't tell me what I feel." She was shouting now, all pretense of calm abandoned. "I love you, you absolute idiot. I've probably loved you since we were children. I just didn't realize it until you reminded me what it felt like to be seen, to be wanted, to be real." Adrian wanted to cross to her, wanted to pull her into his arms and tell her he loved her too, had loved her for longer than he'd admit himself. Instead, he stood frozen, every muscle locked, and watched her heart break. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I can't. I'm not. You deserve better than me." Penelope laughed, but it was a broken sound. "You keep saying that, but what if I don't want better? What if I just want you?" "Then you're making a mistake." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, straightened her spine, and lifted her chin. "Fine, if that's what you want, then fine. Consider our arrangement concluded, my lord." The formal title was deliberate. "A weapon. Thank you for the lessons. They were most educational." She turned and walked away down the darkened path, her back straight, her steps steady despite the tears still streaming down her face. Adrian watched her go and felt something inside him crack clean through. He'd just made the worst mistake of his life, and he had absolutely no idea how to fix it. Chapter 5. Adrian Blackwood was drunk, not pleasantly tipsy the way he'd been at hundreds of society gatherings, not even the devil-may-care intoxication he'd cultivated as part of his rakish reputation. No, this was the ugly kind of drunk, the kind where the room spun and his thoughts became a tangled mess and nothing helped, not even another bottle. He reached for the decanter on his desk anyway. "My lord." Graves appeared in the doorway of the study, his expression carefully neutral. "Perhaps you might consider retiring for the evening? It's nearly 4 in the morning." "Go away, Graves." "Miss Harrington called again today. That's the 4th time this week." "Said go away." The butler hesitated, then withdrew with a disapproving sniff that would have made Adrian laugh under other circumstances. He poured another glass with hands that weren't quite steady and tried not to think about Penelope. Failed spectacularly. It had been 2 weeks since Vauxhall Gardens, 2 weeks since he'd kissed her and then pushed her away like a coward, 2 weeks since she'd told him she loved him and he'd responded by shattering both their hearts, 2 weeks of absolute misery. He'd thrown himself back into his old life with a vengeance. Gaming hells every night, drinking until dawn, reckless wagers he barely remembered making. He'd even gone back to Valentina, showing up at her door at midnight with no explanation. She'd taken him back without question, probably sensing opportunity in his obviously disrupted state. The reunion had been a disaster. They'd made it as far as her bedchamber before Adrian realized he couldn't do it, couldn't touch her, couldn't even pretend to want her. All he could see was Penelope. All he could feel was the ghost of her lips against his, her hands in his hair, her voice breaking as she said, "I love you." He'd left Valentina's with some excuse about urgent business, ignoring her furious Italian curses, and gone to the worst hell he knew. Lost £200, got into a fight with a man twice his size over nothing. Woke up the next morning with a black eye, empty pockets, and a hollowness in his chest that whiskey couldn't touch. And still, Penelope kept calling. The first time, 3 days after Vauxhall, Graves had announced her presence and Adrian had hidden in his study like a child, listening to her voice drift up the stairs as she asked the butler to tell Lord Ashcroft she just wanted to talk. He hadn't gone down. The second time, she'd tried a different tactic, left a note. Adrian had burned it without reading it, though he'd stared at his name written in her familiar hand for a full 5 minutes first. The third time, she'd actually caught him leaving the house. He'd seen her waiting by his carriage and turned around, gone back inside, sent word he was indisposed, watched from his window as she stood there for 10 minutes before finally leaving, her shoulders slumped in defeat. He was a bastard, a coward, everything she'd called him and worse, but he couldn't face her. Couldn't risk seeing the love in her eyes and knowing he didn't deserve it. Couldn't bear the thought of hurting her worse than he already had. So he drank and gambled and avoided his own life with the dedication of a man running from the gallows. You look like hell. Adrian looked up to find his brother-in-law, Lord Rothschild, standing in the doorway Graves had vacated. Marcus was one of the few people who could get past the butler's defences, being married to Adrian's sister Elizabeth. "Thank you for that astute observation," Adrian muttered. "Now get out." "No." Marcus came into the room, took the decanter from Adrian's desk and moved it out of reach. "You've been on a 3-day bender. Elizabeth is worried. I'm curious, and you're going to tell me what happened." "Nothing happened." "Try again. You look like you've lost your best friend. You're drinking like you're trying to pickle your liver, and according to Graves, you've refused to see Penelope Harrington 4 times this week." Marcus sat in the chair across from the desk, making himself comfortable. "So I'll ask again. What happened?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "It's none of your concern. Your family. That makes it my concern. Since when do you care about my personal life? Since you stopped being an entertaining rogue and started being a tragic figure drinking himself to death in his study." Marcus's tone gentled slightly. "Talk to me, Adrian. What did you do?" The words came out before Adrian could stop them. "I kissed her." Silence. Then, "Well, that's not what I expected you to say." "I kissed her and then I sent her away because I'm an idiot and a coward and—" Adrian broke off, reaching for the decanter that was no longer there. "I told her she deserved better, ended our arrangement, used her family name like we were strangers." Marcus whistled low. "That's impressively stupid, even for you." "I know. And now she's trying to see you and you're hiding?" "I'm not hiding. You're absolutely hiding." Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious now. "Why?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Because she said she loved me. And that's bad." "Yes, she can't." "She doesn't." He stopped, tried to organize his chaotic thoughts. "She thinks she loves me because I showed her freedom, because I gave her an escape from her humiliation. But it's not real. It's just gratitude mixed with rebellion, mixed with—" "Are you trying to convince me or yourself?" Adrian glared at him. Marcus sighed. "Let me ask you something. Do you love her?" "That's not. It doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters. Do you love Penelope Harrington?" The truth sat in Adrian's chest like a stone. Heavy. Undeniable. "Yes," he whispered. "God help me, yes." "Then what are you doing here? Protecting her? From me? From the disaster I'd make of her life?" "Has it occurred to you," Marcus interrupted, "that maybe she's capable of deciding what's best for herself? That maybe treating her like a child who doesn't know her own mind is actually more insulting than anything else you could do?" Adrian opened his mouth, closed it again. "You're not protecting her, Adrian. You're protecting yourself from the possibility that this could be real, that she could actually love you, that you could be happy together." Marcus stood, moved toward the door. "And in the process, you're making you both miserable. You don't understand. I understand that you're so terrified of being hurt again, that you're sabotaging the best thing that's ever happened to you." Marcus paused in the doorway. "Catherine destroyed you once. Are you really going to let her destroy this too?" He left before Adrian could respond. Adrian sat alone in his study, Marcus's words echoing in his head, and felt the truth of them settle into his bones. He was letting Catherine win. Still, after all these years, the knock on the door made him jump. "I told you to leave me alone, Marcus." But it wasn't Marcus. It was Graves, looking uncomfortable. "Forgive the intrusion, my lord, but Miss Harrington is here. Again. And she says she won't leave until you see her." Adrian's heart lurched. "Tell her." "With respect, sir, I've been telling her you're unavailable for 2 weeks. She's made it quite clear she no longer believes me." Graves paused. "She's threatened to camp in the foyer if necessary. I believe she's serious." Despite everything, Adrian felt his lips twitch. That sounded like Penelope. "Fine, send her." "Actually, my lord, she's already—" "Right here," Penelope finished, appearing beside Graves in the doorway. She looked terrible. Beautiful, but terrible. There were shadows under her eyes that suggested she'd been sleeping as poorly as he had. Her dress was simple, almost plain, none of the carefully chosen outfits she'd worn to their scandalous outings. but her chin was lifted and her eyes were fierce, and she looked at him like she could see straight through every defense he'd carefully constructed. "Hello, Adrian." His name on her lips hit him like a fist to the chest. Graves, sensing the tension, beat a hasty retreat. The study door closed with a soft click, leaving them alone. "You shouldn't be here," Adrian said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "Probably not." Penelope came into the room uninvited and sat in the chair Marcus had vacated. "But I've discovered I'm quite good at doing things I shouldn't. You taught me that. Penelope, I've been calling for 2 weeks. You've refused to see me every single time." She crossed her ankles, settling in. "So now I'm here, and I'm not leaving until we talk. Properly talk. You can call for Graves to throw me out, but I'll just come back, and back and back, until you either see me or have me arrested for trespassing." Despite the ache in his chest, Adrian felt something warm unfurl. "You're threatening me?" "I'm making a promise." Her eyes met his. "I'm done being dismissed, Adrian. I'm done letting other people decide what I want or what's best for me. So we're going to have this conversation whether you like it or not." Adrian should argue, should send her away for her own good. Instead, he found himself saying, "Talk then." Penelope had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in her head, had planned exactly what she'd say, how she'd say it, the perfectly logical arguments that would make him understand. But now, sitting across from him, seeing the shadows under his eyes and the haunted look on his face, all her careful plans evaporated. "You look awful," she said instead. "Thank you. You're not the first person to mention it today. Have you been drinking? Extensively? Gambling? Unwisely? Sleeping with Valentina?" His eyes snapped to hers. "How did you? Lady Rothschild mentioned it. She seemed to think I'd want to know." Penelope kept her voice steady despite the spike of jealousy. "Did you?" Adrian looked away. "I tried. Couldn't go through with it." "Why not?" "Because she wasn't you." The words hung in the air between them. Penelope's breath caught. "Then why are you avoiding me?" she asked quietly. "If I'm what you want, why did you send me away?" "Because wanting you and being good for you are different things." Adrian stood, began pacing, his familiar tell for distress. "You deserve someone honourable, Penelope. Someone who hasn't spent the last 6 years cultivating a reputation for vice. Someone who can give you the life you should have had." "I had that life!" It was called being engaged to Edmund, and it was absolutely miserable. She stood as well, frustration bleeding into her voice. "Why can't you understand that I don't want respectable? I don't want proper. I want real. I want honest. I want you. You think you want me. Don't." She crossed to him, forcing him to look at her. "Don't tell me what I think. Don't tell me I'm confused or grateful or rebelling. I know my own mind, Adrian, and I know I love you." He flinched like she'd struck him. "You can't. Why not?" "Because I'll destroy you." The words burst out of him, raw and desperate. "Everyone I love ends up hurt, destroyed. My father died thinking I was a disappointment. My brother died before we could reconcile. Catherine..." He stopped, his jaw working. Penelope went very still. "Who's Catherine?" Adrian turned away, but not before she saw the flash of pain in his eyes. "Tell me," she said softly. "Please." For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly, "Someone I loved once, a long time ago." "What happened?" "I was a second son. She was an earl's daughter. We fell in love. Or I thought we did. I proposed. She said yes." His voice had gone flat, distant. "Then her father made it clear I wasn't good enough. No title, limited prospects. If I wanted her, I needed to become someone worthy first." Penelope's chest tightened. She could see where this was going. "I tried," Adrian continued. "Worked myself nearly to death trying to make a fortune, to be worthy of her. She promised to wait. 3 months later, she married a wealthy earl. Didn't even tell me. I found out from the wedding announcement in the papers." "Adrian, when I confronted her, she looked me in the eye and said she'd never loved me, that she'd been amusing herself while waiting for a real match. Asked if I'd honestly thought someone like her would throw away her future on a penniless second son. He laughed, but it was a bitter sound. I was such a fool. Penelope wanted to find this Catherine woman and slap her, hard, repeatedly. That's when you became," she gestured vaguely at him, "a rogue, a scandal? Yes! If everyone thought I was worthless anyway, I decided to give them the best performance of my life." He finally turned to look at her. "And then you came along, my childhood friend, the one person who'd always seen me clearly, and I thought I could help you without risking anything. But you couldn't. No. His voice cracked. No, I couldn't. Because somewhere between teaching you to play cards and waltzing too close and watching you laugh freely for the first time, I fell in love with you, and it terrified me. Penelope's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. You love me? Of course I love you. He said it like it was obvious, like it was painful. I'm completely, devastatingly in love with you, Penelope, which is exactly why I can't be with you. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. I loved Catherine and she destroyed me. What if I love you and you realise I'm not enough? What if you wake up one day and see what everyone else sees, a reformed rake who's only pretending to be respectable? What if I lose you the way I lost her? I'm not Catherine, Penelope said fiercely. I know. No, I don't think you do. She crossed to him, took his face in both hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm not some earl's daughter looking for a convenient match. I'm not going to measure your worth by your title or your fortune or your reputation. I've seen you, Adrian, the real you, and I love every part of what I see. You don't know? I know you visited me when no one else would after Edmund left me. I know you gave me freedom when I was drowning. I know you chose me over your mistress at the opera. I know you sent me away at Vauxhall because you were terrified, not because you didn't care. Her thumbs brushed against his cheekbones. And I know that I would rather have one real moment with you than a lifetime of proper, respectable misery with someone else. Adrian's eyes had gone suspiciously bright. Pen, I love you, she said again, making sure he heard every word. I love your recklessness and your kindness and the way you see me. I love that you taught me to be brave. I love that you're terrified right now, but still standing here listening to me. She took a shaky breath. And I'm not going anywhere. You can send me away 100 times and I'll come back 101 because you're worth fighting for, Adrian Blackwood, even if you don't believe it yet. For a long moment, Adrian just stared at her. Then, slowly, carefully, he covered her hands with his own. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. You're impossible. You've mentioned that before. I'm going to disappoint you, fail you, make you regret this. Maybe. Probably. I don't care. She rose up on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. Are you going to kiss me or are you going to keep arguing? A laugh broke from him, surprised, helpless, wonderful. What if I want to do both? Then you'd better start with the kissing. Adrian kissed her. It was different from Vauxhall, less desperate, more certain, like a promise instead of a goodbye. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Penelope made a small sound of satisfaction. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, the words rough but sure. God help me, I love you so much. I know, she smiled against his lips. I love you too. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, and Penelope felt something settle in her chest, something right. This was where she belonged. Not in a drawing room playing the perfect daughter, not at the altar waiting for a man who'd never truly wanted her. Here, in Adrian's arms, choosing each other despite everything the world said they shouldn't. What happens now? Adrian asked quietly. Now we figure it out together. Penelope pulled back enough to see his face. No more running, no more hiding. We face whatever comes next as... The door burst open. Graves stood there, looking more flustered than Penelope had ever seen him. My lord, forgive the intrusion, but there's a situation. What kind of situation? Adrian armed still around Penelope. Mr. Edmund Cartwright and Miss Charlotte Harrington have arrived in London. They're asking for Miss Penelope. Graves paused, clearly uncomfortable. And from what I've gathered, they're in rather desperate straits. Penelope felt Adrian stiffen. Desperate how? She asked. Apparently, Mr. Cartwright's family has disowned him. Miss Charlotte's father did the same. They have no money, no prospects. And, Graves cleared his throat, according to the gossip making the rounds, they're absolutely miserable together. Good, Adrian muttered, but Penelope's mind was already racing. Edmund and Charlotte were back, desperate, looking for her specifically. Nothing good could come from that. Thank you, Graves, she said. We'll deal with it. The butler withdrew, closing the door behind him, Adrian looked down at her, his expression troubled. You know he's going to cause problems. Undoubtedly. He might try to win you back, or make another scene, or... Adrian? Penelope cupped his face again. I don't care what Edmund does. He's in my past. You're my future. Nothing he says or does will change that. You're sure? Absolutely certain. Adrian kissed her again, quick and fierce and full of promise. Then let him come, he said against her lips. Let the whole world come. I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever. Penelope smiled. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. But even as she said it, a small thread of unease wound through her chest. Edmund was desperate. Desperate men did unpredictable things, and she had a feeling their troubles were only just beginning. Chapter 6. Edmund's Meltdown. The rumours reached Penelope before Edmund did. She was taking tea at the Bloomsbury townhouse, Adrian's aunt's property, which had become her refuge over the past weeks, when her maid Mary appeared with news and an expression of barely suppressed horror. Miss Penelope, you'll never believe what I heard at the market this morning. Penelope set down her cup. Try me. Mr. Cartwright's been telling everyone who'll listen that you're still in love with him, that the whole business with Lord Ashcroft is just you trying to make him jealous. Mary's eyes were wide. He's saying once you see how much he's suffered, you'll take him back. He's saying what? And there's more. Mary lowered her voice conspiratorially. Apparently, he and Miss Charlotte can't stand each other. They've been rowing constantly since they returned. She threw a vase at him last week, or so her former maid says. Penelope should have felt vindicated. Should have enjoyed the poetic justice of Edmund and Charlotte making each other miserable. Instead, she just felt tired. Has he tried to contact me? 3 letters. I didn't give them to you. Mary had the grace to look slightly guilty. They seemed unhinged. Mary, I was protecting you. One of them was 12 pages long and made absolutely no sense. Something about destiny and true love and how you were meant to save him. The maid shuddered. It was disturbing, miss. Before Penelope could respond, there was a commotion downstairs, raised voices, the sound of something breaking. Both women rushed to the landing and looked down into the foyer. Edmund Cartwright stood in the entrance hall, looking like he'd been dragged through a hedge backwards. His coat was wrinkled, his cravat askew, and there was a wild look in his eyes that set Penelope's nerves on edge. The elderly butler was trying, unsuccessfully, to bar his entry. Sir, you cannot simply force your way. I need to see Penelope, Edmund's voice cracked. Please, just 5 minutes. I need to explain. Miss Harrington is not receiving. Penelope. Edmund looked up, spotted her on the landing. His face transformed into something that might have been relief or desperation or both. Thank God. I've been trying to see you for days. Your butler keeps turning me away. Because I don't want to see you, Penelope said, her voice cold. She descended the stairs slowly, Mary following close behind. Up close, Edmund looked even worse, unshaven with dark circles under his eyes and the distinct smell of cheap gin clinging to him. This was the man she'd once agreed to marry? He seemed like a stranger. Just 5 minutes, Edmund pleaded. Please, I need to talk to you about everything, about us. There is no us, Edmund. There hasn't been since you left me at the altar to run away with my cousin. That was a mistake, a moment of madness. He reached for her hand. She stepped back. I was confused. Charlotte, she seduced me, made me believe we were in love, but I realise now it was always you, Penelope. It was always supposed to be you. How convenient that you've realised this now, that Charlotte's father has cut you off and you have no money. Edmund's face flushed. This isn't about money, isn't it? Penelope crossed her arms. Let me guess. You've burned through whatever funds you had. Charlotte's family won't support you. Your own family is furious, and you've decided that I, with my wealthy father and my desperate need for respectability, must be the solution to all your problems. That's not fair. You left me at the altar, Edmund. You humiliated me in front of 300 people. You destroyed my reputation and broke my heart, and now you want me to save you? She laughed, but there was no humour in it. The answer is no. Now please leave before I have you thrown out. You're with Ashcroft. Edmund's voice turned ugly. That's what this is about. He's poisoned you against me, made you think. Lord Ashcroft has nothing to do with this. This is about you and me and the fact that you're a coward who ran away with my cousin and now wants me to clean up the mess you've made. I love you! No, you don't! You love the idea of me as a solution to your problems. Penelope moved toward the door, holding it open. Goodbye, Edmund. For a moment she thought he might refuse to leave. His hands clenched into fists, his face going red, and she saw the butler tense, ready to intervene. Then Edmund's shoulders slumped. You'll regret this, he said quietly. When Ashcroft tires of you, when he moves on to his next conquest, you'll realise what you've lost. I already know what I've lost, Penelope said, and I'm grateful to be rid of it. Edmund left, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. Penelope stood in the sudden silence, her hands shaking, and felt Mary's steadying presence at her shoulder. That was very brave, miss. That was very necessary. Penelope locked the door, then leaned against it. Mary, send word to Lord Ashcroft. Tell him Edmund's in London and making trouble, and tell him... She paused, then smiled slightly. Tell him I handled it, but he should probably be prepared for whatever comes next. Yes, miss. As Mary hurried away, Penelope allowed herself one moment of weakness, one trembling breath, one hand pressed to her racing heart. Then she straightened her spine and went back upstairs. She'd meant what she said. Edmund was her past, Adrian was her future, and she'd be damned if she'd let Edmund destroy that. 3 days later, the Winterbourne Ball. Penelope should not have been at the Winterbourne Ball. She knew this, Adrian knew this, half of London knew this. But Lady Winterbourne was one of the few hostesses who still received Penelope, partly because she was a childhood friend of Adrian's mother, and partly because she thought the whole scandal was terrifically entertaining. When the invitation arrived, Adrian had encouraged Penelope to accept. You can't hide forever, he'd said, and I'll be there. We'll face them together. So here she was, in a gown of midnight blue silk that Adrian had insisted on buying for her, standing at the edge of the ballroom and trying not to notice how many people were staring. Ignore them, Adrian murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. They're just jealous that you look stunning and they're all desperately boring. Despite her nerves, Penelope smiled. You're biased. Absolutely. Doesn't make it less true. They'd just moved toward the refreshment room when a commotion near the entrance made everyone turn. Edmund Cartwright stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, clearly drunk. Beside him, looking equally dishevelled and furious, was Charlotte. Oh no, Penelope breathed. Adrian's hand tightened on her back. Stay close to me. But Edmund had already spotted her. His face lit up with something between triumph and madness, and he began pushing through the crowd toward them. Penelope! His voice carried across the ballroom, silencing conversations. Finally! I've been looking everywhere for you. The crowd parted like water, everyone eager to watch the scandal unfold. Lady Winterbourne looked torn between horror at the breach of etiquette and delight at the entertainment value. Edmund stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. Up close, he looked even worse than he had at the townhouse, wild-eyed, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled and stained. Edmund, you shouldn't be here, Penelope said quietly. I had to see you, had to make you understand. He reached for her hand. Adrian stepped between them smoothly. I think you should leave, Cartwright. This doesn't concern you, Ashcroft. Edmund's voice rose. This is between me and my future wife. Your what? Charlotte's voice cut through the gathering crowd. She looked furious, her pretty face twisted with anger. Did you just call her your future wife? Charlotte, not now. Not now. Charlotte laughed shrilly. You dragged me to London because you said we needed to make amends, to start over, and now you're declaring your love for her? The crowd was eating this up. Penelope could see fans snapping open, heads turning to whisper, eyes gleaming with malicious delight. Please, she said, keeping her voice low. Both of you, this is neither the time nor the place. She's right, Edmund interrupted, turning back to Penelope and ignoring Charlotte entirely. This isn't the right way. But I'm desperate, Penelope. Charlotte and I, we're ruined. My family won't speak to me. Hers has cut her off completely. We have nothing. No one. That's not my problem, Edmund. But it could be, don't you see? We were supposed to be married. We were supposed to have a life together. If you just take me back, everything could be fixed. Your father would forgive you. Society would welcome us back. My father disowned me, Penelope said flatly. Society won't welcome me back regardless of who I marry, and I wouldn't take you back if you were the last man in England." "You don't mean that?" "Yes, I do." She lifted her chin. "I loved you once, or I thought I did, but that was before you left me standing at the altar like a fool, before you ran away with my cousin, before you revealed yourself to be exactly what Lord Ashcroft said you were, a pompous, selfish coward." Edmund's face went from pale to red. "I made a mistake. I'm trying to make amends." "You're trying to save yourself, and you want to use me to do it." Penelope felt Adrian's solid presence at her back, drawing strength from it. "The answer is no, Edmund. It will always be no. So please, for the love of God, leave me alone." The ballroom had gone absolutely silent. 200 people held their collective breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Edmund stared at her, his expression shifting from pleading to angry to something uglier. "You've changed," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "You used to be sweet, biddable. Now you're hard, cold. He's ruined you." He gestured at Adrian with contempt. "Careful," Adrian said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Everyone knows she's damaged goods now," Edmund continued, his words slurring slightly. "Everyone knows Ashcroft's been sampling what should have been mine." Adrian hit him. One moment Edmund was standing, still spewing venom. The next, he was on the floor, blood streaming from his nose, and Adrian was standing over him with his fist still clenched. The ballroom erupted. Women gasped. Men shouted. Charlotte screamed something in Italian that was probably obscene. Lady Winterbourne looked like she might faint from sheer delight. "You broke my nose," Edmund wailed from the floor. "Be grateful that's all I broke," Adrian said coldly. "Now get up and get out before I decide to finish what I started." Edmund scrambled to his feet, still clutching his bleeding nose. "This isn't over, Ashcroft." "Yes, it is." Adrian's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "And just to make sure everyone here understands exactly how over it is." He turned to Penelope, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Adrian, what are you?" "Miss Penelope Harrington and I," he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the ballroom, "are engaged to be married. Have been for several weeks now. We kept it quiet out of respect for her recent heartbreak, but I see no reason to wait any longer." The ballroom exploded again, this time with gasps and whispers and shocked exclamations. Penelope stared at Adrian, her mouth open. "You, what, we're engaged," Adrian finished, loud enough for everyone to hear. He took her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that was absolutely improper for a public ballroom. "And anyone spreading rumours about my fiancé will answer to me personally." His eyes swept the crowd, daring anyone to challenge him. No one did. Edmund stood frozen, blood still dripping from his nose, his face a mask of shock and fury. Charlotte had gone pale. And Penelope couldn't breathe. He'd just claimed her, publicly, in front of the entire ton, had staked his reputation and his title on her honour without even asking her first. She should be furious, should be outraged that he'd made such a declaration without her consent. Instead, she felt light-headed and giddy and absolutely terrified all at once. "We should go," Adrian murmured, still holding her hand, "before this gets any more dramatic." He guided her through the crowd, which parted for them like they were royalty. Behind them, she could hear Edmund shouting something, Charlotte crying, the gossip already spreading like wildfire. They made it to Adrian's carriage, and the moment the door closed behind them, Penelope turned on him. "What did you just do?" Adrian had the grace to look slightly uncertain. "I may have been impulsive." "Impulsive? You just announced our engagement to half of London." "I know, without asking me first." "I know that too." "Adrian!" She was shouting now, all the fear and shock and confusion pouring out. You don't get to make decisions like that without even consulting me. What if I don't want to marry you? What if I'm not ready? What if?" He kissed her. It was brief and desperate and thoroughly effective at shutting her up. When he pulled back, his eyes were intense. "Do you want to marry me?" Penelope opened her mouth, closed it. You can't just kiss me every time you want to avoid a difficult conversation. I'm not avoiding it. I'm asking. Do you want to marry me, Penelope Harrington? That's not the point. The point is you announced it without asking. Because Edmund called you damaged goods in front of 200 people, Adrian said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. Because he implied I'd compromised you. Because if I didn't do something immediately, the gossip would have destroyed what little remained of your reputation. So this was about protecting my reputation. This was about protecting you. He ran a hand through his hair. It frustrated. Yes, fine. It was also about punching Edmund in his smug face and making sure everyone knew you were mine. But mostly it was about stopping him from spreading lies that would make your life even more difficult than it already is. Penelope stared at him. So you claimed me? Yes. In front of everyone? Yes. Without asking? Adrian's jaw tightened. Yes, and I realised I should have. He stopped. Started again. I'm sorry, I should have asked you first. Should have discussed it with you. But when he called you damaged goods, I couldn't. You lost your temper. Spectacularly. Hit him. Broke his nose, I think, and then declared we were engaged to protect my honour. That about sums it up, yes. They stared at each other in the dim carriage, the only sound the horses' hooves on cobblestones and their own breathing. Then Penelope asked the question that had been burning in her chest since the moment Adrian made his announcement. Did you do it because you love me, or because you felt guilty? Adrian's eyes widened. What? I need to know. Her voice was steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. Are you asking me to marry you because you actually want to spend your life with me, or because you feel responsible for the mess my life has become? For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her. Then he shifted closer on the seat, took both her hands in his. 2 weeks ago, he said quietly, I sent you away because I was terrified. Terrified of loving you, terrified of losing you, terrified of not being enough. I spent those weeks drinking and gambling and generally making myself miserable because I couldn't stop thinking about you. His thumbs moved in slow circles on the backs of her hands. Tonight, when Edmund called you damaged goods, I saw red. Not because I felt guilty, not because I felt responsible, but because someone I love was being hurt and I couldn't stand it. He met her eyes. I announced our engagement because I wanted to, because the idea of you being mine, of spending my life with you, is the only thing that's made sense in years. Adrian, but you're right. I should have asked first, should have gotten down on one knee and done it properly, instead of blurting it out in the middle of a ballroom scandal. He released one of her hands, reached into his pocket. So I'm asking now, properly. He produced a ring. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds set in gold. Even in the dim carriage light, it gleamed. This was my grandmother's, he said softly. I've been carrying it around for 3 days, trying to find the perfect moment to ask. Turns out I'm terrible at perfect moments. Penelope's eyes had gone hot with tears. Adrian, Penelope Harrington. He was fumbling now, endearingly uncertain for someone usually so confident. You're brilliant and brave and the most magnificently stubborn woman I've ever met. You make me want to be better than I am. You see past all my carefully constructed wickedness to the person underneath. And I love you. Desperately, completely, probably unwisely. He paused. Took a breath. So I'm asking now, the way I should have from the start, will you marry me? Not because society demands it, not because of scandal or obligation, but because I can't imagine spending my life with anyone else. Penelope looked at him, really looked at him, at his dark eyes filled with hope and fear in equal measure, at his hands holding the ring that had belonged to his grandmother, at this man who'd given her freedom and friendship and love all wrapped together. She thought about Edmund, who'd seen her as a convenient bride, about society, which had judged her for circumstances beyond her control, about her parents, who'd wanted her to be perfect and proper and small. Then she thought about Adrian, about late nights and bad decisions and champagne-fueled confessions, about feeling more herself with him than she'd ever felt with anyone else. Yes, she said, and watched his entire face transform. Yes, I'll marry you, not because you announced it in a ballroom or because you feel guilty or because society expects it, but because I love you too. Because you're my best friend and my favourite person and the only man who's ever made me feel truly seen. She held out her hand, letting him slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. And for the record, she added, I quite enjoyed watching you punch Edmund. Very satisfying. Adrian laughed, a real laugh full of relief and joy and love. You're a terrible influence. You taught me everything I know. God help me. I did. He pulled her into his lap, thoroughly improper in a moving carriage, but they were engaged now, so perhaps marginally more acceptable, and kissed her thoroughly. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Penelope rested her forehead against his. "We're really doing this," she said. "Getting married. Having second thoughts already." "Not even slightly." She grinned. "Though my father's going to have an apoplexy when he hears." "Your father disowned you. He doesn't get an opinion." "Fair point." She traced the line of his jaw with one finger. "What about your mother? The Dowager seemed rather concerned about us." "My mother will be delighted. She's been telling me for years I needed to settle down with someone who could handle me. You're the only person I've ever met who fits the bill." "I do handle you rather well, don't I?" "Terrifyingly well." He kissed her again, softer this time. "We'll have to actually plan a wedding now. A real one, with all the trappings." "I want it at St. Michael's," Penelope said immediately. "The same church where Edmund left me. I want to walk down that aisle again and actually make it to the altar this time." Adrian's eyes softened. "Full circle." "Exactly." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the carriage rolling through the London streets, carrying them toward whatever future awaited. "Adrian," Penelope said finally. "Thank you. For punching Edmund, for claiming me, for loving me enough to be absolutely ridiculous in a public ballroom." He smiled against her hair. "You're welcome, though I should probably apologise to Lady Winterbourne. I think we ruined her ball." "Are you joking? We made her ball. She'll be dining out on this story for months." "True." He pulled back enough to see her face. "No regrets?" Penelope looked at her ring, catching the light from the carriage lamps, thought about everything that had led them here. The jilting, the scandal, the lessons in wickedness, the friendship that had turned to love. "Not a single one," she said. "You?" "Only that I didn't punch Edmund harder." She laughed, and the sound filled the carriage like music. Outside, London rolled past in a blur of lamplight and shadow. Tomorrow the gossip would spread. The scandal would intensify. Society would have opinions, most of them unfavourable. But tonight, in this carriage, with Adrian's arms around her and his grandmother's ring on her finger, Penelope had everything she needed. She'd been jilted at the altar, ruined by scandal and disowned by her family. And somehow, impossibly, she'd never been happier. "Take me home," she said softly. Adrian smiled. "Which home? Yours, mine, ours." She kissed him once more. "Wherever you are, that's home." The carriage rolled on through the night, carrying them toward their future together, scandalous, improper, and absolutely perfect. Chapter 7. I'm Choosing You. The silence in the carriage stretched taut as a bowstring. Penelope sat across from Adrian now, having extracted herself from his lap with as much dignity as she could muster. The ring on her finger caught the lamplight, winking like a question she wasn't entirely sure how to answer. "Say something," Adrian said finally. "I'm thinking." "That's what worries me." She looked up at him, this man who'd just announced their engagement to half of London without consulting her first. His hair was dishevelled from where she'd run her fingers through it. His cravat had come loose during their kissing. He looked nervous and hopeful and absolutely terrified. Good. He should be terrified. "You're an idiot," she said. Adrian blinked. "I'm sorry." "You heard me. You're an idiot." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "You punch Edmund in a public ballroom, which admittedly was quite satisfying, but then you announce our engagement without even asking me if I wanted to marry you." "I did ask you. After the fact. After you'd already told 200 people we were engaged." Her voice rose. "What if I'd said no? What if I'd been furious? What if I'd wanted to throw this ring back in your face?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Are you furious?" "Yes." "Are you going to throw the ring back?" Penelope looked down at the sapphire on her finger. It really was beautiful, and it fit perfectly, which somehow made everything worse. "No," she admitted. "But that's not the point." "Then what is the point?" "The point is you keep making decisions for me." She stood, difficult in a moving carriage, but she managed it. "You decided to end our arrangement at Vauxhall. You decided to avoid me for 2 weeks. You decided to announce our engagement tonight. You keep deciding what's best for me without actually asking what I want." "I was trying to protect you." "I don't need protection." The words burst out of her. "I need a partner, someone who treats me like an equal instead of a fragile thing that needs to be managed and controlled and decided for." Adrian stood as well, the carriage suddenly feeling very small. That's not what I... Isn't it? She poked him in the chest hard enough to make him step back. You love me, you say, but you don't trust me to make my own choices. You don't trust me to know my own mind. You're still treating me like the perfect society lady who needs a man to tell her what to do. That's not fair. What's not fair is you kissing me like I'm the most important thing in the world and then pushing me away because you've decided I deserve better. What's not fair is you loving me but being too frightened to let yourself be happy. What's not fair is you asking me to marry you but not believing you're worthy of being my husband. Adrian's face had gone pale. Penelope. I'm not finished. She was on a roll now, months of frustration pouring out. You think I don't see it? The way you flinch every time I say I love you? The way you keep waiting for me to realize you're not good enough? The way you sabotage your own happiness because Catherine convinced you you're worthless? His hands clenched into fists. Don't bring her into this. She's already in this. She's been in this since the moment you decided you weren't worthy of being loved. Penelope grabbed his lapels, forcing him to look at her. Adrian Blackwood, you are brilliant and brave and the best man I've ever known, and I'm so tired of watching you punish yourself for someone else's cruelty. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. She shook him slightly. Stop hiding behind noble excuses about protecting me and protecting my reputation, and just tell me the truth. Why did you really announce our engagement tonight? Adrian stared at her, his chest heaving. For a moment, she thought he'd retreat again. Pull back into that careful facade of the careless rogue who didn't care about anything. Then something in him broke. Because I'm terrified. The words exploded out of him. Because Edmund was standing there calling you damaged goods and implying I'd ruined you, and all I could think was that he was right. That I had ruined you. That everything my mother said was true, and I was going to destroy you the way Catherine destroyed me. His voice cracked. And I couldn't bear it. Couldn't bear the thought of you being hurt because of me. So I did the only thing I could think of. I claimed you. Made sure everyone knew you were mine so they couldn't touch you. So Edmund couldn't touch you. Adrian. But you're right. I should have asked. Should have trusted you to make your own choices instead of trying to control everything. It's just... He ran both hands through his hair, making it stand on end. I'm so afraid of losing you. Every moment we're together, I'm waiting for you to wake up and realize I'm not enough. That I'm exactly what everyone says I am. A reformed rake who's only pretending to be respectable. Penelope felt her anger drain away, replaced by something softer. Sadder. Is that really what you think? She asked quietly. That you're pretending? I don't know what I am anymore. Adrian's voice had gone rough. Before you, I knew exactly who I was. A rogue. A scandal. Someone who didn't care about anything or anyone. But now I care so much it terrifies me. And I don't know how to be this person. This man who loves someone and wants to build a future, and his voice broke entirely. He turned away, his shoulders rigid. I don't know how to be worthy of you, Penelope, and I'm so afraid I'll fail. For a long moment, the only sound was the carriage wheels on cobblestones and Adrian's ragged breathing. Then Penelope moved. She crossed to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind, and pressed her cheek against his back. You idiot, she said again, but this time her voice was soft, tender. You beautiful, brilliant, absolutely ridiculous idiot. Adrian's hands came up to cover hers. Pen, stop deciding what's best for me. She tightened her hold. Stop deciding you're not worthy. Stop letting Catherine's cruelty define who you are. And for the love of God, stop trying to protect me from yourself. But I might hurt you. You might. I might hurt you too. That's what happens when you love someone. You risk getting hurt. She came around to face him, cupping his face in both hands. But I'd rather risk everything with you than have safety with anyone else. His eyes had gone bright. You mean that? Every word. She rose up on her toes, bringing her face close to his. I'm choosing you, Adrian. Not because I'm grateful or confused or rebelling against society, but because you're the only person I've ever met who sees me, really sees me, and loves what you see. I do love you, he whispered, so much it scares me. Good. Love should be a little scary. It means it matters. She brushed her thumbs across his cheekbones. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop sabotaging yourself, stop waiting for me to leave, stop acting like you're not good enough. And if I can't, then I'll keep reminding you until you believe it. She smiled. I'm very stubborn, in case you hadn't noticed. Despite everything, Adrian laughed. I may have picked up on that. Good. Her expression turned serious. Now I need you to answer a question, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Adrian nodded, his hands coming up to cover hers where they rested against his face. Do you want to marry me? Penelope asked. Not because you feel obligated, not because you announced it in a ballroom, not because you're trying to protect my reputation, but because you actually want to spend your life with me? For the first time since the ballroom, Adrian's expression cleared, became certain. Yes, he said simply, more than I've ever wanted anything. Then prove it. How? Penelope stepped back, pulled off the ring he'd given her and held it out to him. Ask me again, properly this time. Not because you're frightened or guilty or trying to control the situation, but because you love me and you want to build a life together. Adrian stared at the ring in her palm. Then, slowly, he took it and dropped to one knee in the swaying carriage. Adrian, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He looked up at her, and the love in his eyes was so intense it made her breath catch. Penelope Harrington, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You took your worst moment and turned it into freedom. You taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness. You make me want to be better than I ever thought I could be. He held up the ring, his hand steady now. I love you. Not the perfect version society wants you to be, but the real you, messy and stubborn and gloriously, magnificently yourself. And I want to spend every day for the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of that love. His voice dropped, became achingly sincere. So I'm asking you now, with no drama or scandal or public announcements, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me? Will you let me love you the way you deserve to be loved, completely, honestly, forever? Penelope's vision had gone blurry with tears. You're already worthy, you idiot. You always were. Is that a yes? That's a... She didn't finish. Instead, she pulled him up, fisted her hands in his coat and kissed him. It was fierce and desperate and perfect. Adrian made a surprised sound, then kissed her back with everything he had. His arms came around her waist, lifting her off her feet, and she wrapped herself around him like she'd never let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Penelope rested her forehead against his. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll build a life with you. I'll love you even when you're being an idiot, which will probably be frequently. Adrian grinned, really grinned with pure joy. Frequently? Very frequently. You're quite talented at idiocy. You bring it out in me. Good. She kissed him again, softer this time. Now put that ring back on my finger before I change my mind. He slid the sapphire onto her hand, and this time it felt different. Real. Not an announcement to save her reputation, but a promise between them. I love you, Adrian said against her lips. I'll marry you. I'll love you every day for the rest of my life. And I promise, I swear, I will never leave you standing alone again. You'd better not. Penelope pulled back just enough to see his face. Because if you try to run away again, I'll hunt you down and drag you back. Terrifying. You should be terrified. I'm very determined when I want something. What do you want? She smiled, slow and wicked and full of promise. You, all of you, the rogue and the Viscount and the boy who taught me to fish and the man who gave me my freedom. I want late nights and early mornings and everything in between. Adrian's eyes had darkened. Everything? Everything. She rose up on her toes, whispering against his lips. Starting tonight, if you're brave enough. For answer, Adrian swept her into his arms and claimed her mouth in a kiss that made it very clear exactly how brave he was feeling. The carriage rolled on through the London streets, carrying two people who'd found love in the wreckage of scandal and heartbreak. Behind them, the Winterbourne ball continued. The gossip spread. Society sharpened its knives, preparing for the wedding of the year, the notorious Lord Ashcroft and the ruined Miss Harrington. Let them talk. Penelope had everything she needed right here. The next morning, Penelope woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the warm, solid presence of Adrian beside her. She turned her head to find him already awake, watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Good morning, future Viscountess," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning, future husband." She stretched, cat-like, and smiled when she saw his eyes darken. "Sleep well?" "Not particularly. Someone kept me awake rather late." "Did they? How inconsiderate." "Extremely." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I should probably complain." "Please do. I'm sure it would be terribly effective." Adrian laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest where she'd pressed against him. We're really doing this?" Having second thoughts, not even one. He tilted her face up, kissed her properly. "Though we should probably discuss logistics, like where we're going to live, whether you want a long engagement or a short one, how we're going to explain to society that we're actually in love and not just trying to salvage your reputation." "Adrian, what? Stop planning and kiss me again." He grinned. "Yes, my lady." They were thoroughly occupied for the next several minutes until a discreet knock on the door interrupted them. "My lord?" Graves's voice came from the hallway. "Forgive the intrusion, but the Dowager Viscountess has arrived. She's requesting an immediate audience." Adrian groaned. "My mother has impeccable timing." "She knows I'm here?" Penelope asked, suddenly very aware that she was wearing one of Adrian's shirts, and absolutely nothing else. "She probably knows what we had for breakfast. The woman has sources everywhere." He pressed one more quick kiss to her lips. "Get dressed. I'll go deal with her." "What should I wear?" "Something that says I'm marrying your son and you can't stop me." "I don't think I packed that particular outfit." Despite his worry, Adrian smiled. "Anything you wear will be perfect. You always are." He left her blushing in his bed, and Penelope took a moment to simply breathe. This was real. She was engaged to Adrian Blackwood. They were going to get married and build a life together and face down society's disapproval with their heads held high. She'd been jilted at the altar 3 months ago, and somehow, impossibly, it had led her here. To love, to freedom, to everything she'd never known she wanted. She looked down at the sapphire ring on her finger, catching the morning light. "Thank you, Edmund," she said to the empty room, "for being such a spectacular fool." Then she got dressed to meet her future mother-in-law and face whatever came next. Together with Adrian, she could face anything. Chapter 8. The Wedding. 3 months later, Penelope stood in the vestibule of St. Michael's Church and tried very hard not to vomit. "Breathe, miss," Mary said, fussing with the train of her wedding gown. "You're white as a sheet." "I'm fine." "You're absolutely not fine. You've been pacing for 10 minutes. Penelope stopped pacing and looked at herself in the small mirror someone had thoughtfully placed in the vestibule. The woman looking back was almost unrecognizable from the one who'd stood here 3 months ago. Her gown was simpler this time, ivory silk without the elaborate lace and ribbons that had adorned her previous wedding dress. Her hair was dressed with tiny white roses instead of the elaborate arrangement her mother had insisted on. She looked, she thought, more like herself. But it was the expression on her face that had really changed. 3 months ago, she'd been terrified, uncertain, waiting for a man who'd never truly wanted her. Today, she was neither terrified nor uncertain. Well, perhaps a little terrified. But only because getting married in the same church where she'd been publicly jilted felt rather like tempting fate. "What time is it?" she asked Mary. "1:30. The ceremony starts at 2:00. Penelope's stomach clenched. Has Lord Ashcroft arrived yet?" Mary smiled. "He's been here since noon, miss, pacing in the vestry and driving the vicar quite mad from what I hear." Something in Penelope's chest loosened. He was here, had arrived ridiculously early, just as he'd promised. "I'll be there at noon," he'd told her last night, holding her face in his hands. "I'll be there at dawn if you want. I'll sleep in the church to make sure I don't miss it." "You're never waiting for me, Pen. Never again." She'd laughed and kissed him and told him noon was quite early enough. But knowing he was already here, that he'd kept his promise, made everything feel suddenly brilliantly real. 5 minutes, miss," Mary said softly. "Are you ready?" Was she ready? Penelope looked at herself one more time. At the simple gown and the roses in her hair and the sapphire ring on her finger that she'd worn every day for 3 months. 3 months of planning a wedding while society watched with bated breath, waiting for another scandal. 3 months of Adrian proving every single day that he loved her, showing up for dress fittings, arguing with florists, insisting they honeymoon in Italy because Penelope had always wanted to see Venice. 3 months of being loved exactly as she was. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." Adrian was absolutely not ready. He'd been ready at noon when he'd arrived at the church. He'd been ready at 12:30 when the vicar had gently suggested he might want to wait in the vestry instead of wearing a path in the marble floor. He'd been ready at 1 o'clock when his best man Marcus had arrived and immediately started making jokes about runaway brides. But now, standing at the altar with 300 guests watching, many of the same guests who'd witnessed Penelope's first wedding disaster, Adrian's confidence was rapidly deserting him. "You look like you're about to be sick," Marcus murmured from beside him. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're green." "I'm fine," Adrian insisted through gritted teeth. The organ music started. A different piece from last time. Penelope had insisted, and the guests rose as one. Adrian's heart stopped. Then the doors opened and Penelope appeared. She was alone. Her father had refused to attend, and she'd refused to ask anyone else to give her away. Instead, she walked down the aisle by herself, her head high, her eyes locked on Adrian. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Not because of the dress or the flowers or any of the trappings society demanded, but because she was Penelope, brave and stubborn and walking toward him with absolute certainty in every step. She'd been left waiting at this altar once before. She would never wait again. Adrian met her halfway down the aisle, thoroughly improper, entirely unplanned, unable to wait another second. The guests gasped. The vicar looked scandalized. Penelope laughed, her eyes bright with joy and tears. "You're supposed to wait at the altar," she said as he reached her. "I've done enough waiting." He took her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Ready?" "Absolutely terrified." "Good. Me too." They walked the rest of the aisle together, hand in hand, and Adrian didn't give a damn what anyone thought. The ceremony was supposed to be dignified. It lasted approximately 5 minutes before Adrian and Penelope thoroughly scandalized everyone by kissing before the vicar had finished the vows. "My lord," Reverend Phillips said, affronted, "I haven't yet pronounced you." "Consider us pronounced," Adrian said against Penelope's lips, making her laugh. The kiss deepened, became less appropriate for a church, and someone in the congregation, probably Adrian's mother, cleared their throat pointedly. They broke apart, both grinning like idiots. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the vicar said dryly, having apparently decided to simply accept defeat. "Though it appears you've already taken care of that yourselves." The congregation erupted into laughter and applause, some scandalized, some delighted, all entertained. Penelope looked at Adrian, her new husband, and felt joy bubble up in her chest like champagne. "We just scandalized a church," she said. "We excel at scandal. It's our special talent." "Should we feel bad?" "Absolutely not." He kissed her again, briefer this time. "Ready to face them?" She looked out at the crowd, at Adrian's beaming mother, at Marcus laughing, at her brother and sister-in-law who'd defied their father to attend, at the friends who'd stood by her through everything. And at the back, lurking like a thundercloud, Edmund Cartwright. He'd had the audacity to attend, probably hoping to object. Penelope caught his eye and smiled. Then she turned to Adrian, rose up on her toes and kissed him again. Thoroughly, publicly, making it absolutely clear who she'd chosen. The congregation whooped. Edmund turned and left. Perfect. The wedding breakfast was held at Adrian's townhouse, which could barely contain the 100 guests who'd been invited. Penelope was still glowing when Adrian stood to give his toast. "I'll keep this brief," he said, raising his glass, "because my wife is giving me a look that suggests I should." Laughter rippled through the room. Penelope blushed. 3 months ago," Adrian continued, "I asked Penelope to marry me in the middle of a ballroom scandal. She was furious, as she had every right to be, but she said yes anyway, which suggests either remarkable forgiveness or questionable judgment." "Definitely questionable judgment," someone called out. More laughter. "I'm inclined to agree," Adrian said, his eyes finding Penelope's across the room. "I'm not the husband anyone would have chosen for her. I'm reformed, yes, but I'll never be entirely respectable. I gamble too much, I speak too freely, and I once rode my horse into a ballroom on a dare." "You what?" Penelope mouthed at him. He winked. But somehow, this remarkable woman looked past all of that and chose me anyway. She saw the person I was trying to become instead of the person I'd been, and she gave me something I'd stopped believing existed, a second chance at love. His voice went softer now, more serious. So I'd like to propose a toast to my bride, to Penelope, the bravest, most stubborn, most magnificent woman I've ever met, and to Mr. Edmund Cartwright, wherever he is, for being such a spectacular fool as to let her go. The room erupted in laughter and applause. Glasses clinked. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes even as she smiled. Adrian crossed to her, ignoring protocol entirely, and pulled her to her feet. "I love you," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life. And I promise to only occasionally ride horses into ballrooms." "Only occasionally?" "I'm setting realistic expectations," she laughed and kissed him, and the breakfast dissolved into cheerful chaos. Venice, 2 weeks later. "I can't believe we're actually here." Penelope stood on the balcony of their rented palazzo, looking out over the Grand Canal as the setting sun turned everything to gold. Adrian came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "It's everything you imagined." "Better." She leaned back against him. "I never thought I'd see it. Venice, I mean. I thought I'd spend my life in London, hosting dinner parties and managing households and never going anywhere interesting. And now I'm in Venice with my husband, who is currently kissing my neck and making it very difficult to appreciate the view. There will be other views, other sunsets." His lips moved against her skin, sending shivers down her spine. "We have all the time in the world." They'd spent 2 weeks exploring Venice, getting lost in narrow streets, eating gelato on bridges, making love in the afternoon sunlight while the city sang around them. Adrian was teaching her Italian. She was teaching him that not everything required a scandal to be exciting. It was perfect. "Adrian," she said softly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For this, for Venice, for the wedding, for everything." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "For giving me a life I didn't even know I wanted." His expression softened. "You gave me the same thing, a life that's real instead of performed. Love that's honest instead of dangerous, a future instead of just endless empty nights. We're rather good for each other, aren't we?" "Disgustingly so." He kissed her, slow and thorough. "Ready to go back inside?" "Why? What did you have in mind?" Adrian's smile turned wicked. "I thought we might scandalise the palazzo staff." "Adrian! You married a rogue, Lady Ashcroft. You knew what you were getting into." Penelope laughed, the free, joyful laugh she'd discovered with him, and let him pull her inside. The sun set over Venice, and 2 people who'd been broken by scandal found healing in each other's arms. London, 6 months after the wedding. Lord and Lady Ashcroft. The announcement carried across Lady Pemberton's ballroom, and conversations paused as every head turned. Penelope felt Adrian's hand tighten on hers. Ready? Always. They'd been back in London for a month now, having extended their honeymoon by several weeks, because Venice was too perfect to leave. This was their first major social event since the wedding, a test of sorts to see how society would receive them. The answer, it seemed, was with considerable interest. They made their way through the ballroom, Adrian nodding to acquaintances, Penelope smiling at the few friends who'd stood by her. The whispers followed them like a wake. "Is it true they kissed before the vows?" "Scandalous, but rather romantic. She looks happy. He looks besotted. Quite the love match, apparently." Lady Pemberton herself swept over, her expression unreadable. "Lady Ashcroft, how lovely to see you again." "Lady Pemberton," Penelope curtsied, perfectly proper. "Thank you for the invitation. Well, one can hardly ignore the most talked-about couple in London." The Countess's lips twitched. "Tell me, is it true your husband punched Mr. Cartwright at the Winterbourne ball?" "Broke his nose, actually," Adrian said cheerfully. "Quite satisfying." Lady Pemberton laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her. "I like you, Lord Ashcroft. You're refreshingly honest." She turned to Penelope. "And you, my dear, are clearly thriving. I heard you've been running secret card nights for bored society ladies." Penelope felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That was supposed to be discreet." "Nothing in London is discreet, darling, but between you and me, I think it's marvellous. Half the ladies in my acquaintance are dying for an invitation." She swept away, leaving Penelope slightly stunned. Did Lady Pemberton just approve of us? She asked Adrian. I believe she did. But she's the most proper woman in society. She's also desperately bored and appreciates anyone who makes life more interesting. Adrian grinned. We're very good at that. The evening continued. Some people were cold, the truly scandal-averse who would never forgive Penelope for her ruined reputation, but others were warm, curious, even envious. And through it all, Adrian stayed by her side, not hovering, not protecting, just present, her partner in every sense. Later, when they'd escaped to the terrace for fresh air, a young woman approached them hesitantly. Lady Ashcroft? She was perhaps 20, with nervous eyes and a hopeful expression. Forgive the intrusion, but I wanted to thank you. Penelope blinked. Thank me? Whatever for? For being brave. The girl's cheeks flushed. My engagement recently ended rather publicly. Everyone's been treating me like I'm ruined. But seeing you and Lord Ashcroft, seeing how happy you are despite everything, it gives me hope that I might find that too someday. Penelope felt her throat tighten. What's your name? Miss Sarah Thornton. Well, Miss Thornton, let me tell you something. Penelope took the girl's hand. Being ruined is the best thing that ever happened to me. It taught me to stop living for other people's approval and start living for myself. And yes, it was hard, but it was also necessary. You don't regret it? Sarah asked. The scandal, the gossip, all of it? Penelope looked at Adrian, standing a few feet away and watching her with such love it made her chest ache. Not for a single moment, she said. Sarah smiled, a real, genuine smile, and squeezed Penelope's hand before disappearing back into the ballroom. Adrian crossed to his wife, pulled her into his arms despite the impropriety of such a public embrace. You're going to become an icon for rebellious young ladies, he said. Good, they need someone to show them it's possible. What's possible? Being ruined and being happy, breaking the rules and finding love, choosing yourself instead of society. She rose up on her toes, kissed him softly. All the things you taught me. I didn't teach you anything. You were always brave, Pen. You just needed permission to show it. They stood there on the terrace, wrapped in each other's arms, while inside the ballroom society continued to whisper and speculate and judge. Let them. Penelope had everything she needed right here. 1 year after the wedding. Push, my lady! Just one more! Penelope screamed something extremely unladylike about what Adrian could do with himself, then pushed with every ounce of strength she had left. A baby's cry filled the room. A boy, the midwife announced, beaming. A healthy baby boy! Penelope collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and exhilarated and utterly overwhelmed. A boy. She had a son. Adrian burst into the room approximately 3 seconds later, looking wild-eyed and terrified. I heard screaming. Are you... Fine, Penelope managed, her voice hoarse. We're fine. Come meet your son. The midwife placed the squalling infant in Penelope's arms, and time seemed to stop. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced, and absolutely perfect. Adrian sank onto the bed beside her, staring at the baby with an expression of wonder. We made that. You helped. I helped make that perfect human being. He touched the baby's tiny fist with one finger, and the infant immediately grabbed hold. Adrian's face crumpled. Oh God, I'm going to be terrible at this. Probably, Penelope agreed, exhausted but smiling. But you'll be a loving disaster, which is better than a competent bore. Thank you, I think. They sat there together, the three of them, while outside the spring rain fell on London and the world continued turning. What should we name him? Adrian asked. Penelope looked at her son, then at her husband. At this man who'd given her freedom and love and a life more honest than she'd ever dreamed possible. What about William? She suggested. After your brother, the one you never got to reconcile with. Adrian's eyes went suspiciously bright. He would have liked that. William Harrington Blackwood, Penelope said, testing the name. Future Viscount Ashcroft, heir to a scandalous legacy and absolutely no pressure whatsoever. We're going to be such embarrassing parents. The most embarrassing. She leaned her head on Adrian's shoulder, carefully cradling their son. Think he'll forgive us? Eventually. After years of therapy and several strongly worded letters. Penelope laughed, then winced. Don't make me laugh. Everything hurts. Sorry. Adrian kissed her temple. I love you. Thank you for this. For him. For everything. I love you too. She looked down at William, who'd finally stopped crying and was staring up at them with unfocused eyes. "Thank you for punching Edmund. Always happy to punch Edmund. And for announcing our engagement without asking. That one I'm still apologising for. And for being brave enough to love me even when you were terrified." Adrian's arm tightened around her. "Thank you for loving me back. For seeing past the rogue to the person underneath. For giving me a family when I thought I'd lost the right to one." They sat in silence for a while, just the three of them, until William started fussing and the midwife gently suggested Lord Ashcroft should perhaps leave and let his wife rest. Adrian kissed Penelope one more time, then their son, then reluctantly left. Penelope settled back against the pillows. William nestled in her arms and thought about how far she'd come. A year ago, she'd been standing at an altar, waiting for a man who'd never arrive. Now she was lying in bed with her son in her arms and her husband just outside the door, probably driving the staff mad with his nervous pacing. She'd been jilted, ruined, disowned, and she'd never been happier. The end. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed listening to this story, don't forget to subscribe to Scandalous Hearts for more addictive Regency and historical romance audiobooks every week. Like this story and leave a comment. We want to hear your thoughts and know where you're listening from. Hit the bell so you never miss a steamy story again.